You got it?
Thank you, Paul.
Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order.
Give me one second, Chairperson. Yes, just setting up the stream. Okay, you're good to go.
We're going to call the meeting to order at 6:01. Okay, we're going to start with resolution and
Ready to begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to start with public comment. So any persons who wish to address the planning commission are asked to. Oh, sorry about that, Mr. Roll call.
Chairperson Mark Energy.
Here.
David Seaboard.
Here.
Chairperson Kevin Anderson.
Here.
Chairperson Stephen Wong. Chairperson Rick Curran.
Here.
So we're gonna do verification of posted agenda. I apologize, I just got here literally 2 minutes ago, so I'm still trying to get my bearings. I apologize for that. Verification of agenda posting.
The agenda was posted Monday, November 14th, 2022 at 5:02 p.m.
And then the approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any corrections, changes? The minutes from last meeting, October 21st? If not, can we get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Now we will start the public input. Okay, so this is time for anyone in the audience to speak on any item not on the agenda and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the planning commission. Speaker cards are available in the lobby and are complete. It should be completed and given to the secretary before speaking. And speak to when the secretary calls you, please come up to the podium, say your name and your city for the record and speak to the planning commission. If you are joining by Zoom, then please click at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand if you're joining us on a cell phone. You can press the asterisk and 9. Each speaker will get 3 minutes to speak with a maximum of 30 minutes per subject matter. Please note that state law prohibits the planning commission from discussing or taking action on any item not on the agenda. Do you have any speaker cards?
I have no speaker cards and I have no hands raised in the virtual audience.
Okay, so we'll start with item 1. So item 1 is site and architectural review 2022-4. Jeffrey Eaton /E2 Architecture. The applicant is requesting site and architectural review approval for the construction of a 45,705 square foot addition to an existing 52,729 square foot industrial building and related improvements, including a new parking lot located at 1700 Shelton Drive in the M1 zoning district, further identified as Saville County Assessor parcel number 051-120-022. SEQA categorically exempt.
So this item was continued from the last planning commission meeting, and after that meeting, as we got closer to this meeting, the applicant requested a continuance again. So this time, we're not going to continue at date certain. The applicant's going to pay the fee that we have for a continuance. And once they let me know that they're ready to go, then we'll renotice and reschedule the hearing of their project.
Okay, so, that's fine. Do you need anything from the commission? Do you need to vote on this to continue it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so any questions from commissioners, comments, or if anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move to continue with the item to a date uncertain.
Can I get a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, should we do roll call? Roll call?
Commissioner David Dufresne,
Yes.
Commissioner Ted Henderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Luke Brennan,
Yes.
Commissioner Stephen Brown,
Yes.
Chairperson Rosalind Freeman.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Okay, so let's go ahead and then move on to item number 2 on the agenda. Item number 2 is site and architectural review 2022-7, conditional use permit 2022-7 for a planned unit development. KB Home / Charlie Hazelbaker. The applicant is requesting site and architectural review and conditional use permit for a planned unit development approval for the construction of 60 cluster lots, 33 of which will be moderate affordable units, which are a part of phase 2 of the larger west of Fairview subdivision, TM 2007-1. The project is located north of Union Road, west of Fairview Road, and east of Householder Drive in the residential west of Fairview Road, RWF zoning district, CEQA environmental impact report. Can you get a staff report?
To give you a little bit of background.
Sorry. I'm sorry, everyone. I don't know why it didn't go away. I know. Why isn't it playing? I don't know why it's not playing anymore. Hang on.
Happy to see that.
It was working a second ago. Sorry. It's not.
Do you know that folder?
Yeah, I guess, but it was literally playing a second ago. Hang on.
There we go.
All right.
For a little bit of background, this property is part of the West of Fairview specific plan. The cluster lots that we're looking at tonight are required by the development agreement between the city and Award Homes. The tentative and final map for this development is approved. You have looked at this project before, if it sounds familiar. KB filed an appeal of the Director of Development Services determination that a second permit was required for review of the project. You reviewed that appeal on October 27th during a public hearing. You denied the appeal and directed staff to bring the project back for review of the site and architecture review and a planned unit development permit, and that's what we're looking at tonight. So this is 60 cluster lots, some of which are affordable as required by the development agreement. These are detached single-family homes. They are centered around a private driveway or street. There are 3 architectural styles: Craftsman, French Country, and Early California, and each architectural style has 4 variations. This is the typical lot layout where you can see the homes clustered around an internal private driveway or street. Most of the houses, as you can see, will have a short front yard setback. They have a much larger rear yard setback, and the most of the front of the houses will only be shown visible from this internal driveway. And then what you see from the other streets surrounding it is the rear or side in some cases of the property. So the typical front elevation that you'd see on in a normal development is not what you'd be looking at here. This is an example of the design of the Craftsman style. So you can see how they've changed up the elevation. And in this case, I'm showing they're calling it the front elevation because that's where the door is. But again, that garage is really facing that internal driveway. But this is the front elevation. So you can see how they've changed it up 4 times for the one design. This project does include a planned development to allow the development standards that they're requesting. And what we've gone and done is also included that minimum lot size that we talked about before. So it's all included within one document. So we have their minimum lot size. We have a front setback of 5 feet to the garage and structure, which is different from the West of Fairview specific plan. We have a side yard setback of 5 feet, street side yard setback of 10 feet, rear setback of 15 feet minimum, lot coverage of 50%. Parking will be 2 spaces covered, and for street trees, it will be dispersed throughout the site, not located facing the internal street. The project will provide additional affordable housing, as well as different housing types within the West of Fairview specific plan. The design and development standards for the project have been included in the plan unit development, and they're included in that resolution before you tonight. And construction of the development will increase the availability of affordable for sale homes within the city. The Planning Commission has several options for tonight to approve the project subject to the conditions of approval, to approve the project but modify the conditions of approval if you would like to do so, to deny the project, or to continue the hearing and direct staff to provide additional information or clarification. And staff is recommending that you adopt a resolution approving the site and architectural review and a resolution approving the planned unit development tonight. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions?
Yes, Madam Chair. In the introduction, it says 33 of the units are for moderate affordable.
Yes.
Can you kind of give us a little description on what moderate affordable, what income level is that to?
Moderate income is 80 to 100% or 120% of the area median income.
Okay, this is the first time I've heard that connected moderate affordable.
So the way the state terms things is very low, and moderate. And in this case, for this project, the reason that you're seeing moderate come up is because the development agreement between Award Homes and the city, as part of the specific plan, required some affordable units, and then the development agreement further spelled it out. And it was sort of the 33 units are more of that is what the developer gave us for us to extend the life of their development agreement. The development agreement contains all the specifications for those affordable units, so they have to follow that. It's for the life of the unit, they are for sale, and there's other provisions that they have to follow for a marketing plan and stuff like that.
Are there any deed restrictions or anything that ensures the affordability?
I'm gonna say this with a 90% certainty that the DA, as part of the housing agreement, that's part of the conditions of approval on this project because it's reflective of the DA that's already in place. There'll be a housing agreement, and as part of that, there will be these will have a deed restriction because they have a term as defined in the DA.
Thank you.
Can we just clarify again? You said 80% of
Yes, so moderate income or affordable to moderate income level of families is defined as 80 to 120% of the area median income. So there's The area median income, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's for our San Benito County region.
And it's not based on like, any like average market rate housing.
No,
It's
it's a,
not
it's a
based on that.
state, these are state defined affordability levels. But the restricted affordability restricts rental and or for sale prices to buyers who are qualified in a qualified income category, which in this case would be that they make 80 to 120% of the area median income. There's calculations and things like that, and our housing coordinator, Jamila Saka, she's our expert on those, and she'll be working with us and with the applicants developing a housing agreement for this project to make sure all those terms are clearly defined and the processes are outlined.
And, sorry. Just to clarify Commissioner Huboy's question, so for the SNA, there are the conditions of approval, there's condition of approval number 16, which requires the affordable housing agreement between the developer and the city, and that has to be prior to the issuance of a building permit. And then condition of approval number 17 requires a restrictive covenant for each of the houses to limit the or to require the term as per the DA for the affordability. So they will have to do that.
Thank you, Veronica. Just as a general comment, I'd like to, in the future, talk about these levels of affordability and explain how these levels relate to our community in terms of the demographics and the average wage earner that lives here.
Yeah, I can definitely talk with Jamila, and maybe we can have a presentation item at some point for the planning commission.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, any questions on this part? No? Okay, I don't have any questions either, so we should go into public comment. Okay, so we're gonna do public comments starting 6:19.
I don't have any speaker cards. I don't know if the applicant wanted to speak. We do have a presentation from them if they'd still like to give that. Let me pull that up. I found the open one. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. And then do I just tell you to advertise? Okay.
We'll do it and I'll bring you with me.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. What we'd like to do is just talk through the architecture a little bit further. Thank you to staff for giving the overview. Thank you. So what is in front of you is the overall Westwood Fairview site plan with the single family homes and the clusters highlighted in yellow in the middle, so you can branch yourself. This is the same cluster exhibit that staff had up, and it identifies the 4 different plan types that we have within each of the cluster units. This is an example of our crossing style elevation, and this wanted you a little bit to what staff was referring to. In this picture, the B elevation style is what you would see when you drive into the cluster on the auto court. And then the A elevation is as you're walking down the path, that's the front of your house. As we've designed these, we have 360 architecture, the same trim details, accents of the gable around the entire homes. Here's an example of another plan type with the Spanish style elevation. Again, continuing the detailing around this, it has S-tile roof, which differentiates itself from the other 2 styles. This is our French country style. This has a different roof pitch, different window detailing. What we tried to do is create a mix on the auto court so that the homes, as you drove down, had a different look to each of them. And then the Other court view of this home that you view A, and it has the side front garage, which is view B. The fourth plan, in the French country style as well. All of these plans have the same 4 or 3 elevation styles. And we just intersperse the details like staff had mentioned. Just a quick overview, we designed these elevations to be consistent with other homes in the west of Fairview area. So that is highlighted in the green. And then you can see the same elevation style as Craftsman, early California, or Spanish and French country for these homes. And these are just a couple samples of floor plans. To give you an idea of the level of detailing. Each of the homes have, or each of these styles have 3 distinct color schemes that are used interspersed throughout the clusters as well. And we're here if you have any questions. Okay, so any other questions for us?
I do have a question, and I think the stylings are fine. The small lots with small yard spaces, so the inhabitant, if you wanted to go to an open space, how far would you have to?
To a park.
To a park.
About half a mile.
It's the Whale Park, which is within the general West of Fairview development.
I know there are guidelines on distances from public parks.
So,
How does that relate to?
so for west of Fairview, the specific plan laid out where the parks go, and it was approved with a specific plan. So there's no changes to that. There's nothing we can impose differently. And then with this project, remember, there's already a tentative map and a final map for those lots.
I guess the parks and the open spaces
That's all
will
under
get
the,
addressed at the tentative maps level.
it's addressed at the specific plan level and then the tentative maps, all the tentative maps. So, yeah.
Even put you on the spot.
No worries. I said it's very close. It's just like you watch, I think, well, I was right on there, so. So I think it's very close and it has a large open, like running area that's not as efficient, like it's a like. Okay, so any other comments from the public on this item?
I have no other speaker cards and no hands raised.
Okay, so I'm gonna close the public. Speaking session time at 6:24. And then, come back to my fellow commissioners and see if anybody has any questions or comments. Or would like to the motion.
Well, I think one of the benefits of this proposal is the variation of smaller lots. It gives a more diversity of housing types to the general area. I think that is the smaller lots, smaller homes, it's almost like affordability, what we call affordability by design. And I think that's certainly reasonable. I like that the design for the cluster lots is fairly consistent with the that's nice. That's good.
I had a question on for the property borders 25. On the side, is there a sound barrier wall or is it just gonna be regular fencing?
There are regular fences around the cluster lots.
Okay.
There's sound walls were identified in the EIR for various locations, but that's mostly on the major arterials.
So there won't be, so it'll be wooden fences between 25 and.
There is a sample already, but it's not this, it's not the other thing.
Oh, it's the different, sorry.
Yeah, it's behind, because I just live in that neighborhood.
Yeah, there's a sound wall on Fairview Road, that's part of the west of Fairview, and there are sound walls on Union. But these clusters are within the larger phase two and around these particular lots and all the rest of the lots generally within the subdivision. It's just standard wood fencing with the exception of those major roads.
So.
I'd just like to say that from what I've seen, having 3 different architectural styles to be a nice blend. The whole lot laid out is pretty interesting. I think it'd be something good for that.
Okay, and my only comment is, that I appreciate the, moderate, the moderate income, part of this. I do think though that it would be good to have a little bit more information on that. I thought when it's low moderate, it was based also on the cost of housing in that area, but so I think it would be good to have some more information on that, maybe not for this project, but on a subsequent project or on a separate meeting. I think we need a little bit more information about that.
Yeah,
Just so that-
definitely. And if I can add one point of clarification, just the way that it's calculated, and I don't have the exact calculators, but they kind of extrapolate a rental price or a market price based on what the qualified buyer or renter can afford monthly, and it's a restriction cap based on some percentage of their income, 30 or 35, I'm not exactly sure. But so you figure out what the person who's qualifying to buy can afford, and then that restricts the prices at which they can be sold or rented. That's how it works at that house. So
Yeah, and then I think the other part of that would be helpful to learn more for us is, who applies, how, what does that process look like? Who does the eligibility determination? Is it restricted to San Bernardino County residents only, like all of those kinds of questions, like a little bit more detail about how it really works when that actually happens, because I can imagine, especially if these are moderately affordable, that it's going to draw a lot of interest. And so I can imagine that there's gonna be thousands of people wanting to buy these homes, so I think it would be really important for us to understand what that process is like, for our community. Okay, so, I don't have any other questions or comments, and, I'm gonna check in with the rest of you, if somebody want to make a motion, or how would you like to proceed with this item? I'll go ahead and make a motion. I will, make a motion for option 1 to adopt resolution approving SMA 2022-7 and resolution approving. What does it mean to be different?
No.
Okay, adopted, CP 2022-7, subject to the conditions of approval as attached.
for the discussion. I just wanted to, just one more comment is that plan unit developments, part of the creative process, the flexibility that the project shows, and in relation to the specific plan requirements, affordability is certainly part of that plan development process, and that's one of the reasons I think And I appreciate your comments to learn a little bit more about the affordability aspect of these planned unit developments. With that, I'll second.
Thank you. So should we do a roll call vote?
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Brennan Henderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Stephen Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Luke Curran,
Yes.
Chairperson Roxanne Stephen.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Yeah, thank you. Let's move on. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to item number 3.
That's right.
So item number 3 is tentative map 2021-5, conditional use permit 2022-2 for planned unit development. Rio Properties LLC, the applicant is requesting a vesting tentative map and conditional use permit for a planned unit development approval to subdivide 18.24 acres into 92 lots, 16 for new duet units, 75 for new single family detached units, and 1 parcel for stormwater treatment and a linear park. The property has a general plan designation of low density residential and is within the low density residential performance overlay 9R1-L/ED zoning district. Site and architectural review is not part of the application. The project is located between North Chappelle Road and Highway 25 bypass north of Pacific Way, further identified as San Diego County Assessor Parcel number 051-230-006, CEQA Environmental Impact Report. Can you get a second?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. This application is for a tentative map. This is an aerial view of the project site. It is again located just south of, kind of in the corner of the Highway 25 bypass and east of the North Chapel Road. The applicant, the proposal is to subdivide this area into 92 total lots, and there will be one of those for stormwater treatment, but the other 91 will be for residential development. Excuse me, there'll be 90 for residential development, 1 for a park, and then 16 of the 90 will be duet units, and those are located on these lots that are facing largely the Highway 25 bypass and linear park that is proposed. In addition to the tentative map, there is a request for a planned unit development. There are 2 different types of developments proposed in this subdivision. There are single family detached lots, which are requesting a slightly smaller minimum lot size, but still within the planned unit development chapter of our code. For 4,400 square feet. They are requesting a slightly smaller lot width on some of their corner lots, which would be 55 feet rather than the standard 60 feet. They have not requested any changes to standard lot coverage or building height, so those will be set at the R1 standard of 50% and 30 feet high respectively. Their other requests are for setback changes to accommodate on the smaller lots, a slightly decreased front yard setback at 13 feet and a 10-foot setback for any porches in that front yard, standard garage depth of 20 feet. And then on the side yards, they are requesting an interior side yard change from 6 feet to 5 feet, which has been typical of many of our planned developments in the city in recent years. And the final setback they're requesting is a 13-foot rear yard setback minimum. In addition to the single family detached units, they are also proposing, as mentioned, duets, which are technically classified as single family attached units. So townhomes, but duets are just 2 attached as opposed to 3 or more in a row. Again, a smaller minimum lot size for some of these at 3,360 square feet, which is still well within what's permitted to be allowed by a planned unit development. They are requesting some different lot widths, and as you can see on the map, some of the lots are a little bit unusually shaped. So 47 and 42 foot lot widths on some of those lots as the minimum. Again, no change requested for lot coverage or building height. And they're requesting those same front yard setback differences of 13 feet to the house and 10 feet to any porches, with a typical 20-foot garage setback and driveway. And then again, a request for a 5-foot setback on the interior of the non-attached side of these units, with an exception as well for a 0 lot line, because these are of course attached duets on one side, and a 13-foot rear, same as the detached. As part of this analysis of the project, there was a condition in the Chapel Road Master Plan EIR document that required a noise analysis due to the proximity of Highway 25. And as you may recall, if you're familiar with the Chapel Road Master Plan, there is a linear parkway, and there is a stipulation that there was a desire to not have sound walls along the interior of Highway 25, but rather landscaping and homes facing out as appropriate to make it more of an inviting entrance to the city gateway. And so to accommodate for noise, there is required to be a landscape berm that's 9 to 10 feet in height, higher in some areas, measured from the center of the highway. But also as part of that noise analysis, there were some requirements for interior and exterior treatments of some of the closer units. So staff is recommending that there is a condition of approval to require site and architectural review prior to final map. This would be required of all the duet units regardless in our code. However, we're requesting it for all of the units in the project, just for consistency, so the planning commission can view everything, and also to make sure those noise standards are going to be met with some of the materials during that review. As I briefly mentioned, in the lower left of your screen, this is the adopted Chapel Road Master Plan conceptual design, and the project is proposing to continue that linear open space parkway that they're designating as parcel A. And this is when the whole Chapel Road Master Plan area is built out. This will be a significant open space area, and it'll connect all the way down to Santa Ana Road and along the bypass up to San Felipe, where more of our commercial is, and it'll provide a pedestrian and multi-use path, as well as open space for the community and these residential users in this area. So they're dedicating 1.58 acres of parkland, which meets their parkland dedication requirements as well. Staff has analyzed the project, and we have found it to be consistent with our general plan at 4.93 units per gross acre. That's consistent with the low density residential requirements from 1 to 8. They're providing a variety of housing types, which includes small lot, single family detached, as well as those single family attached duets, which is a relatively unique product here in Hollister. And those will be for sale units. So they'll be owned, they're fully on their own lot, but they share a wall. So they could be for sale units. They're dedicating 1.5 acres of parkland. And of course, that'll be consistent with our Chapel Road Master Plan that was adopted by the City Council. All of the requested modifications to development standards are consistent with our permitted requests that the Planning Commission can consider in the LPZ zoning district for planned unit development. And the project at the densities and design proposed is consistent with the adopted EIR for the Chapel Road area pre-zoning. Staff this week has been working with the applicant because we noticed that I had been using a slightly older version of a draft resolution for this project. So before you, I provided a redlined version of both resolutions, as well as a Excel sheet that goes over all of the conditions, and they've been kind of reordered. So I'm happy to go over in detail any questions with the applicant or with the Planning Commission. But I've gone through this with the applicant yesterday at a meeting, and I believe we were both comfortable with all the changes. So I was just going to go through everything relatively quickly, what we're proposing. On both resolutions, the APN refers to the old county APNs, but it has been assigned a new city APN since annexation. So we're requesting to just correct that in the whereases where referenced in the conditions. And then a correction in one location on the tentative map, whereas to include the word vesting in front of tentative map. On both resolutions, they've been significantly rearranged, so all of the condition numbers are all different, but other than that, there's no language change outside of the ones we're going to discuss, and fixing a couple of formatting issues. The really minor modifications are on conditions 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, 9, 15, 94, 108, and 109, adding some language in condition 1 to reference the CUP that's also being requested, fixing the word vesting, adding the APN number, and correcting a change from referencing an elevation to referencing a final map, and using a newer language and format that we're using for that standard condition. Using a newer language and format for permit expiration and appeal period, fixing a spelling error on condition 6. Conditions 8 and 9 are in reference to the berm and the noise study. We're changing that to reflect the October 12th, 2022 noise study, not the August 8th, 2022 version. That was an update to that August 8th version. We changed condition 9 to reflect just that the berm will comply with the results of the noise analysis rather than dictating that 10-foot berm, because we're going to work with staff and the applicant and the noise analyst to make sure that just the berm meets the noise requirements. And then I added a name for reference on 4 of those conditions with no changes to the actual language. On condition 10, this one is about the linear park and having it go to the Parks and Recreation Commission for a recommendation on the improvements. Again, this was on an older version, and we are proposing to change it just to what was placed on the recently approved PAD Investment Trust tentative map. That's also in the Chapel Road Master Plan area. And so we're just reflecting that same condition, and we like to carry that throughout this Chapel Road area as it develops. A slight modification to 72A to reflect that if there's no recycled water available, they can use potable water for dust control. It currently reads that they have to use recycled water. We are proposing to delete condition 67, 89, 103 through 106, 107, and 110. The first 2 aren't relevant or are covered by other conditions. 103 through 106 have to do with phasing of offsite improvements, but they are an older version that's already reflected by other conditions, with the exception of one that I'll talk about on the next slide. 107 is a standard condition requiring Airport Land Use Commission review, but they have already gotten Airport Land Use Commission review. So in this request of change, we're just proposing to remove that. And condition 110 has a reference to Caltrans permitting, but there's no Caltrans work in the project scope. So proposing to remove that as well as unnecessary. And then we are proposing to add a few conditions. Again, I've gone over all of this with the applicant in a couple of meetings and emails back and forth over the past few days. So we're adding just a time extension condition. This just modifies one that already existed and got split into 2, but this is a newer language and format we've been using. Overtime inspections and code violations, those are standard language, but they were missed in the draft resolution. This is kind of the big one, San Felipe Road corridor improvements. This is a condition that reflects the final version of the phasing and offsite requirements for reflecting the fair share cost analysis that was done by Rick Engineering for offsite improvements on San Felipe Road. And these offsite improvements are going to be contributed to and built out on a phased per trip basis as the entire Chapel Road Master Plan area is developed. So this condition is more correct than the 103 through 106 that were in the draft. There was also a condition for rustic basin improvements that was also placed on the PAD Investment Trust map that was not on this one. And it just reflects an analysis that was done by the city engineering team regarding the stormwater mitigation, and that if this project doesn't mitigate on site, which is their plan, there is some mitigation that needs to be done at the basin to accommodate the project. So this condition reflects that. And then a real estate disclosure condition was generated from ALUC's review of the project that was completed, and this is a standard language condition for that. So with all those changes, and again, I'm happy to discuss any that anyone has any questions on. Staff is recommending that the council review the request, receive testimony regarding the proposal, and adopt 2 resolutions. The first, given the last 2 resolutions that were adopted, for the record, would be 2022-20 and 2022-21. This first resolution would be 2022-22, lots of 2s. For approving the vesting tentative map, subject to the findings and conditions contained in the red line draft resolution provided to the planning commission and previously described, accepting all those changes proposed. That would be our recommendation. And then the second resolution to approve conditional use permit 2022-2 for planning and development, subject to the findings and conditions contained in the draft resolution with a correction to reflect that APN change. And that's the only change in the red line. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Eva. Any questions?
So all these changes to the conditions of approval, what's the source of all the text that you're making?
So the conditions were, the main one that came up, which triggered the review more thoroughly, was the San Felipe condition, because that one dictates the fair share requirements. Let me pull the number. I think it was 81 previously. I could be wrong on that one. And essentially the question was that because this was based off an earlier draft of conditions of approval that was done quite a while ago, it didn't reflect the same changes that we had been discussing, because this project and the Pad Investment Trust project, while not the same project, they share an engineer, and we've been working on them both in tandem. So Pad Investment Trust conditions got updated when that project moved forward a few months ago, but this draft didn't. But then we based it off the wrong draft, and that's completely my fault for the wrong reference. So it had the wrong phasing conditions. So the proposed condition and then the removal of the proposed conditions reflects the studies that were actually completed after that first draft was done. And then essentially in my review, I was comparing both the draft for this one, the original draft, and the Pad Investment Trust conditions that were the most up-to-date for a project similar in the same area, and making changes to make sure that the conditions that we had put on the Pad Investment Trust, because it was in the Chapel Road Master Plan area, were reflective of this product as well, which is also in that area, if that makes sense. And then I moved things around to make it easier to read in ultimate form, but also easier for me to understand when I was comparing back and forth. So pretty much every number got changed.
So when you go to make the list of visibility, do you have a template that you're working from?
No, it's on my long list of things that we would like. We typically look both at things that are given to us by our development review committee when they give us comments and conditions, but we also look at past projects. And this one, again, we looked at one that was already mostly drafted, or so we thought. But no, the city doesn't actually have formal standard lists that we use at this time.
Okay, and regarding this condition, why was that about the airport mention?
Yes.
So why is it relevant that a review was already done?
So this is in the airport influence area. So that requires review of the Airport Land Use Commission for consistency, a determination of consistency with the airport land use compatibility plan that's in place already. And we and the applicant had this project go through that review, I believe, back in May, to get a determination of consistency. I think staff is moving towards that so that we can reflect any conditions from ALUC in the resolution when we bring the project forward to you guys for review. But that it sometimes has been taking place after the fact, after approval, when they're going through their improvement plan reviews and things like that. But this project already went to ALUC in May, and ALUC had one condition that they deemed, which was the real estate disclosure. So it doesn't need to go to ALUC again, but we do recommend that their condition gets conditioned on the project. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I was trying to, I mean, this seems to be like, if it's a requirement that a review of the airport commission happens, seems irrelevant whether it's happened already or not, it's still a condition, and why are not misunderstandings?
So it doesn't have to be removed, it could stay. It's more of that they're not gonna go again because it already happened. So instead, we're reflecting the results of that review in the condition. But it wouldn't make a difference if that condition stayed or did not stay. It's kind of like the San Felipe corridor improvements changes we're requesting. The previous conditions kind of reference that a fair share analysis would need to be done and that the phasing was slightly different, but that analysis is already completed. So we have the actual result and the per trip cost. So we're reflecting that number and that phasing strategy in the conditions more specifically to the project and the analyses that are already completed.
Anyone else? Long, romance, questions? So I just wanted to get a couple clarifications. So we speak a little bit to the fair share analysis for the road improvement, and specifically what I'm hoping to get a little bit more information on is which roads and improvements are we speaking to in that area, especially because it goes right up against 25 and then. So anyway, you can just speak to what those are, and then also even if you don't have specific numbers, can you just give us a general idea of what the cost sharing would be for the applicant?
Yeah, sure. So I do have a specific number. The specific number.
So here's what I'm looking for more info,
Yeah.
rather than specific, although that's fine too.
Well, I can tell you the phasing.
What I want to understand how we're sharing it, right? So the city has some share in this, and then the developer, the applicant does too. So I want to have a better understanding of what that seems like. So if you just give me a number like $1 million, doesn't really mean anything if it's not compared to something else. So that's more what I'm trying to better understand, although a number is okay. And if you can give me a way to understand that in context, that's even better.
Definitely.
And then also my other question.
Okay, so the city council, and I don't have the dates, but the city council a year, maybe 2 years ago, adopted a plan line for San Felipe Road nearby the Chapel Road Master Plan area, which went from, actually, let me pull up a different slide. So the city council adopted a plan line for San Felipe that started at Highway 25 and went south down San Felipe, and I believe it ended at Gateway. And that included intersection improvements, a median, etc., things like that. And then I believe it also included improvements here on Pacific Way that were anticipated with the ultimate development of the Chapel Road Master Plan area, which extends further south here off the screen to Santa Ana Road to the south, and then all the way up into this, what you're seeing in this aerial view as ag land. This kind of most westerly corner of the Chapel Road Master Plan is intended to be commercial ultimately, as planned. And then the rest of the Chapel Road Master Plan is designated to be residential ultimately as planned. So in this plan line that was adopted for San Felipe, there was a phasing analysis that was done for when these improvements would be triggered, which means that as development occurs, there are environmental triggers, which in this case, the environmental trigger is traffic congestion. And I believe there are 4 phases that were identified for the ultimate development. So there's a phase 1 improvement of San Felipe from Gateway to Highway 25 that requires certain things such as right turn lanes or, you know, building out this section of this intersection. And then phase 2 is an even more, you know, adding right turn onto 25 or something like that. And so what was done for the entire Chapel Road Master Plan area is that they would contribute to these ultimate improvements, but each house doesn't trigger the full maximum improvement, right? One house doesn't trigger all these requirements to be done on Highway 25 and San Felipe and Pacific. And whereas in the future, a commercial proposal might generate 600 trips in the evening, and this is all done when you do a specific traffic analysis. So what was established is that the first commercial unit would trigger the first phase of this project. So, and I don't have the specifics on those improvement requirements. Our engineering team might have them at the top of their head. But if a commercial was to develop first, there had to be the phase 1 of the San Felipe improvements done and Pacific Way, whatever that is specific. And then, yeah, I can let Mark speak if Mark wants to speak.
He's just available.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll give him an allow to talk. But the phase 2 is triggered when 750 trips are ultimately developed. And then phase 3 is 1,000 and the final improvements are triggered when 1,500 trips are generated onto this roadway. And then this project is residential, and each residential unit is anticipated to trigger 1/45th-ish of a trip based on the calculations that were done. And so what'll be happening is this project, the PAD Investment Trust project, and any other project that comes in here will be contributing their fair share costs, which has been established at $2,470 per residential unit for the first phase. And the city will be collecting those funds into a separate account. And then when that trigger is made for the 100th PM trip, those improvements will be built. And the fair share costs that have been collected will be contributed to that construction, but the rest of the construction, the city won't have additional contributions. The one other side of this is that the city could go out for a grant or something to build these improvements, and then the fair share costs would be collected after the fact by the contributing developments. And the city would build it if we got grant money. But the developments are triggered, or the improvements are triggered by development. And so they're not, the city isn't responsible for them when they are required because development triggers them. If that helped at all, I can keep going, or if you have another question. It's a lot. Yeah.
So, so let me just, can you just give me like bottom line, like, so this was what I heard, this is how I understood it. There will be some costs involved, you may not know what the costs are until a little bit later as things move along in the construction or in whatever conditions. Whatever conditions are like triggered based on traffic and other circumstances, right?
Yeah.
And then later, the cost can be kind of determined or estimated, and then based on that, then the actual cost then, or the fair share of what the city would be contributing and the applicant would be contributing is determined. Is that sort of what you said?
A little bit, so
Okay.
the cost of the improvements has been estimated.
Okay, so.
So let's say I'm gonna throw out a completely wrong and random number. Let's say it costs $2 million to do the improvements. And we'll give each phase, we'll make it $500,000. So the first phase costs $500,000. Per this analysis, we'll use the actual number this time. 450 residential units trigger $500,000 of improvements. They trigger the first phase. So then that $500,000 is divided by 450. And as each one is developed, we'll be collecting the exact fee from each of them. It increases by the CPI. I'm almost certain. Yes, it increases by the CPI. So it increases as costs increase annually. But we'll be collecting. So the city will be collecting $500,000 ultimately, right? But then when the 451st one goes, that's when there's enough traffic that we need those $500,000 of improvements. And the city has $500,000 to reimburse, but the developer that triggers the improvement builds the improvement. Does that help?
Yeah, that, okay.
Does that help?
It's still.
It's complicated.
But I think,
This,
Okay.
this condition is the right one.
okay. Yeah, I just wanted to get a little bit better understanding. It's gonna take a little bit still to get totally what we can, but I think I have a better understanding. And then just a follow-up question. The improvements, do they also impact, or would they improve any of the conditions on any of the like the contiguous streets, so the streets that kind of meet up, that are not part of the project, but meet up
So,
with this neighborhood that is about to be built?
so Pacific Way has improvements, and is intended to be extended. So this is Pacific Way as it exists currently. Pacific Way is intended to extend all the way to San Felipe, and that improvement and this road improvement is part of that San Felipe plan line. And will be improved when Chapel Road triggers it. This project will be improving Pacific Way this way along their map. Let me click here. So they'll be improving Pacific Way because it's part of their access here. They'll be doing full improvements from North Chapel, which is right here on the left, to Majority Drive. And then I believe that they have their frontage, so a half street or possibly a 3/4 street improvement for the rest of it. And then if and when a development to the south happens, they'll improve Pacific Way. But as for the quote unquote offsite improvements, it's only Pacific Way and then San Felipe improvements. As for onsite, like if this one were developed or this one or one to the south, they would improve their frontage, which is a requirement standard of all developments. And they contribute again their share to these offsite improvements. But they're not going to improve like Madrone Drive or Logan Street. Those are not those improvements would be going beyond what you could reasonably attribute to this development or this
Even if the
development.
streets are attached, even if like it just extends that street.
So they would improve frontage. So like they'll improve Chapel Road here. This one is a little weird because they don't actually have frontage on existing streets, but they have frontage on the extension of existing streets, and they'll improve those frontages. To the south, like this project, this development here, if it were to develop, they would improve Chapel Road here as part of their frontage. But to do an offsite like rustic or something that isn't contiguous and isn't a environmental trigger like a traffic requirement that is impacted by their development specifically, that would be an inappropriate improvement.
Okay. I do have another question, but let me check in my open just a second, probably another time. So let me see if there's anybody else that's question or comment. Question.
I wanted to apologize because I was looking actually at this when I asked my question on the last item, so the where the property connects and touches 25, there's gonna be no fencing at all, it's just gonna be the park berm that's gonna separate 25 from the negative.
So there'll be a fully landscaped berm, and then this is the proposed kind of cross section of the berm. There'll be a few walls here and landscaping and improvements. Part of the Chapel Road master plan and the kind of request for it was initially triggered by the council because they requested to have no sound walls. They didn't like the aesthetics of the sound walls. If you've driven the further south portion of Highway 25, you'd be familiar with kind of the sound walls along Serato and as you get more into town. And the council did not like that aesthetically. So this will be a pretty significantly steep berm, but it'll be fully landscaped. And one of our conditions, which we're proposing a modification, but again, just to reflect that it's exactly the same as the other project that was in the same area. We are proposing that it be sent to the Parks and Rec Commission so that the ultimate improvement of the landscaping, it can include what the sound walls or any wall, like retaining walls on this side look like, as well as the pedestrian trail and any amenities that are provided in that linear pathway. When ultimately this linear pathway is improved, the Parks and Rec Commission will be able to give us a consistent eye and a consistent recommendation on the landscaping and improvements so that this is a consistent park pathway improvement. But long story short, no sound walls. That was a key component of the Chapel Road master plan.
And then as I'm looking closer, it looks like eventually the Pacific Way will have a overpass that goes all the town back.
So that was an original proposal and it was in this drawing, but that was a removed requirement by the council. So there wasn't a requirement to dedicate that right of way. That was one of the things. So Pacific Way will end at 25 for the foreseeable future, long foreseeable future.
But we're gonna plan in seconds at the side there and then here it says.
Yeah, so this cul-de-sac is actually north of Pacific Way. Let me back up. So Pacific Way runs along the southern property line. So this is actually Pacific Way here. And the kind of end will be determined with right now, I think it just ends, but if the property to the south, if we needed to turn around, is completely figure that out as development happens. But it's just Pacific Way, and then we enter into the proposed subdivision, and this is a new street proposed.
Okay, so, okay, so I want to just kind of speak to the same issue, because I remember this when it first came, and I was concerned about just what that park would look like, and then today we referred to it a lot, we use the word parkway rather than park. So I'm just wondering if there's a distinction, because it is a really weird shape for a park, and I'm wondering if we have any information about what kind of park are we talking about, because I know that that was a major issue when this first came to us around safety in particular. It was just going to be a place where children were going to be playing. It's just going to be a place where there's some grass area where people can just kind of relax. I mean, well, sort of, and if this is something that's going to go to the parks people first, then I think that's okay. But I do think that it's important pieces of information that we need as we're making a decision on this project tonight.
Yeah, so this is a kind of unique area, the Chapel Road master plan, and one of the kind of intentional things was less of a big square, or what would more actually happen if these were not a unified 13 parcels collected into this master plan area, is we would have probably ended up with 13 pocket parks that were the size of their respective properties as they developed individually and contributed open space towards their required open space. So part of the vision of the Chapel Road master plan was instead of one community park, there was a thought of a parkway or a trail, because this is an opportunity location both to connect this proposed future development area, but also existing residential development to the south, which is our main portion of town, Santa Ana Road and Highway 25. You have schools kind of nearby, and there's no real way to get up to the commercial area that is the North Gateway, unless you're in a car. So this was an opportunity to consolidate all of the individual parcels open space requirements for this whole area into one unified open space area, I guess. And the thought was a trailway and a multimodal path so that you can connect those kind of bifurcated places, because San Felipe Road isn't necessarily a safe pedestrian walkway, and yet all of our commercial and potential commercial growth for North Gateway, as well as industrial even further to the north, is up here on San Felipe Road, where no one from town can access it. So the thought was to consolidate open space in the overall area into this type of an open space trail. Oh, yeah, Amber from the audience is telling me that we also have our Health and Human Services north on San Felipe that has no access as well. So that was part of the connection opportunity that we saw here.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking of the linear park, how will it be maintained? Is it community facilities district, HOA?
Yes, so the linear park itself will be publicly maintained through the community facilities district, and we'll coordinate that annexation and the different facilities that'll be publicly and privately maintained within this and future developments between both an HOA and a community facilities district project.
Good, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so I'm not seeing any, so let's go to public comment, at 7:15.
Okay, I do have a speaker card for Victor Gomez.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Honorable Chairwoman Stevens, good to see you. Victor Gomez with Pinnacle Strategy, land use consultant on this project representing the applicant. A couple of things, there's plenty of discussion, but first I want to say I appreciate Eva and all her work over the last 72 hours. It's been quite a bit reconciling these conditions of approval with the approval of pad investment, which was done a couple of months ago by this planning commission. So we're excited that that is reconciled. Regarding the comments on San Felipe Road improvement, the San Felipe Road improvements that were presented by Rick Engineering are all being paid for by the developers. And this is above and beyond our traffic impact mitigation. So the basic fee that we're paying, and I think that fee currently is somewhere around $20,000 per unit. The improvements to San Felipe Road that we're contributing per unit is in addition to that. So I just want to make that clear. Every single unit moving forward, including the pad investment that was approved a couple months ago, are all contributing to these improvements. And again, above and beyond. The concept of the linear park was something that came out of the city council. They didn't want to see the sound walls. They wanted to see something different. And this was what was proposed, approved by the planning commission, and then unanimously approved by the city council as well a number of years ago. We started this project in February of 2015. So here we are 8 years later, and again, happy to be here before you. Those changes were all reflected in the updates that you have received. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. The only issue is the berm. So obviously we were dealing with the sound mitigation. We were able to conduct a sound study that clearly identified that the berm would mitigate the sound issue. The map that you actually have in your packet, there's a small change to it because we do need the berm included in there. So I did ask Eva to prop up that map. If she's not able to, all we're asking for is direction on the duets. Because the duets currently are not outlined appropriately in the map that's here in front of you. But again, that's a simple change because it's regarding the berm. Unit count, lot count, nothing changes. Berm included, again, linear part, all of that. We are in community facility districts, and in addition to that, we are in HOA. So everything will be fully paid for by both CFDs and the HOA as well. So Peter Smith with HMH Engineering is, I think, probably available online to answer any technical questions that you may have. But again, we ask for your support here this evening, and again, happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. And then it's either requires the.
Yes, I have Peter Smith.
Okay. Mr. Smith.
Peter, you should be about you.
Hi, this is Pete Smith from HMH Engineers. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the sound mitigation. Eva, do you have that cross section of the berm?
Yes.
Yeah, so one of the things, and this is one of the engineering things, but we do these cross sections and we exaggerate the vertical scale so we can fit it on a piece of paper and not make it huge. And so although this looks like a steep berm, it's not. It's a 3-to-1 slope on both sides, 2.5-to-1, which means 2.5 feet wide for every foot tall. So it's quite a wide berm. But you can see we've got sort of a 60-foot dimension from the right of way to right of way of the highway and the street. So it'll look much more gentle than that at the end of the day. So I wanted to point that out. I think it would also be our hope to put some sort of open fencing along the top of the berm, just for safety and to keep kids from running out into the highway or vice versa. So that would be our hope if that's acceptable to the Planning Commission and the City Council. In respect to what Victor mentioned, we struggled mightily to get the sound attenuation to work on this, using the berm and every other trick in the book we could think of. And one of the challenges we found is that the duets are rated differently than single family homes, and they have a different standard for outdoor noise levels. And so in order to meet those outdoor noise levels for the duet lots, we would like to propose to put those on the south side of the property off of Bolsana, as opposed to putting them on the Highway 25 side. So that's the street pattern would stay the same. It's just the lot widths would flip flop, and the wider lots would be on the Highway 25 side and narrower lots on the south side on Bolsana. So that's I just wanted to make that clarification, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions about that.
I have a question. So along with the landscape berm, have you entertained, like tree screening for sound mitigation?
Yeah, I think, of course, we'd love to put trees. I tried to make the berm wide enough at the top to accommodate tree planting. I worked with we have a landscape architectural department in our office, and we would definitely plant trees and whatever other appropriate shrubs that we could to make that an attractive looking berm.
I think that would be certainly would help mitigate the sound as well as add some aesthetics to the berm.
I always wish the trees would, but the acoustical engineers tell me they don't. I don't believe them though.
And you're an engineer, sir. What discipline do you represent?
I'm a civil engineer.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Smith, are you done with your comment? You have a few more seconds left on your comment.
That's the main thing I wanted to clarify. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you for the information.
Thank you.
Any other speakers? Eva?
I have no more speakers on this item.
Okay, so I'm gonna close public comment at 7:21. Okay, so. Let me check back in with my fellow commissioners, what, would you like to further discuss this item, ask for the question. Propose an action.
Madam Chair, if I may, what is the plan, the PC resolution number for the 10th, please?
So we would be on PC resolution 2022-22.
22-22.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve tentative map 2021-5 and adopt PC resolution 2022-22 along with the, I think, the modification to the resolutions as presented in the staff report.
Thank you. Anyone want to second it or, other discussion?
I'd like to second it.
Okay, so. Let's do roll call.
Before we do the roll call, Mr. Smith's recommendation was on doing that fencing, just for a safety issue for, since it's gonna be a park along the highway, it would make sense to me, at least, to add some type of fencing. Can we add that to the recommendation here?
I would be in favor of that. I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah, I think that's important for a safety barrier for kids running in the highway 25.
Does the fencing have to be at the, seems like that's kind of ruins a lot kind of ruins the view, and it's like the space to go on the far side of the, just wondering about that.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I'm kind of torn on this issue because of that. I mean, first of all, I'm having a hard time visualizing what it might look like. Also, and obviously the aesthetics are important, but more importantly, the safety factor is most, critical because of where it's located. Yeah, so I think having some other condition would be better than not, although I'm not sure what that would be, honestly. And so I appreciate the point that Commissioner Henderson raised, as well as just an idea being raised by Mr. Malone, because I think there needs to be something there. And I'm feeling very uncomfortable about just moving forward without something more solid for that part of the project.
Would it be helpful, Madam Chair, to get more clarification from the engineer, Mr. Smith, on where his thoughts are and in terms of locating the fence on what portion of the berm?
I mean, sure would be helpful. I think what would be more helpful, and this is kind of after the fact, is to have a better visual of what that would be like. But I do think that we should entertain both what Commissioner Malone commented on in terms of a condition, as well as a comment that Commissioner Henderson made about it kind of ruining. I mean, it just kind of ruins the point of having it open. So we either have something, a barrier there that's going to block the openness of that area, that would change the aesthetic, or we're not, so that we have a better aesthetic. So I mean, I think it's kind of defeats the purpose. I think we should really discuss that and think that a little bit more as we move forward with voting on this particular motion.
So
Sure.
I have the city engineer checking throughout this, he mentioned also that there is fencing along the highway already. Which would be at the bottom of the ground on the highway side. It's typically like the Caltrans fence that was along the highway.
So it's on the lower elevation and it's not so dominant for the pastoral setting of the. This is fine.
It's still that barrier, you know, the idea of kids coming across the highway.
If I may as well, the Chapel Road Master Plan adopted resolution discusses a potentially low raised fence or low wall as part of that. So that is something that was considered in the Chapel Road Master Plan. And the planning commission is of course welcome to amend the conditions or amend their motion as they so choose. But I think part of staff's thought with the Parks and Rec Commission providing input on the specific details of the park would both be for consistency, but also so we can discuss any low walls, any of the retaining walls, fencing, anti-climb things, and from both the side that will have to be retained slightly to push it back so that we can have that space for a trail. We could also, we've thought about and are talking about, you know, bushes and things like that, trees on that side to both hide those retaining walls and help prevent climbability from the residential side. And then there's the Caltrans fence on the other side, but potentially hiding something as well in landscaping on the berm. So I don't see it as missed with the condition that's in place, but of course, if the planning commission wants to see something more, that's in your purview.
I can see that as a recommendation, subject to the purview of the Parks and Recreation Commission to review the zoning plan. As a safety measure, and then I have confidence in their discretion of it when they go through the review process of the plan.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wood. Please, Commissioner.
I wouldn't mind hearing from Mr. Smith about his thought process of putting the fence at the top of the berm.
Okay,
If that's possible.
sure, I mean, I think that's okay. Is it, do we need to open up the public comment again, or can we just ask him to?
You're welcome to ask any questions.
I'm here. What can I answer?
So, Commissioner Henson, please ask the question.
Yeah, so I'm curious as to your thought process in putting the fence at the top of the berm where it's visible from the homes and, you know, potentially kind of ruins the view of the mountains.
Yeah, that's to be honest, not being a landscape architect, I just plunked it on top of the berm. But I think as long as there's some form of safety with the fence at the bottom near the Caltrans right away, or even the Caltrans fence as well, as long as it's well maintained is fine. I don't think, and I'm not the applicant, but I think I can speak for them and say they're willing to go along with whatever the city recommends or is comfortable with, as long as, you know, we just want safety for our residents and for others.
Madam Chair.
Sure, Mr. Gaines.
Just a humble recommendation. I think I really like where Commissioner Hugo was going and really leaving that potential discussion to the Parks Commission. But I do want to make a statement regarding the master plan because we paid for the master plan to be developed. And line of sight was important to that. And so in all of those discussions we had regarding the master plan, the view, right, was important, so, but with that said, we'd be happy to take whatever recommendation the Parks Commission, direction they give us, and we're willing to pay for whatever that recommendation may be.
I think that, let me check, Commissioner Owen, do you have anything else to respond to the suggestion that Commissioner Wade? Okay, so I think, I'm not really sure that I'm totally comfortable. What I would rather have is know what that is before we vote on this, but obviously I think that may or may not be possible, but I think what I would feel comfortable with is if there was a real emphasis on the concerns that were raised here. And that when they are talking about this in their own meeting, that they aren't just simply considering what they generally think about and talk about, but that they have a real good understanding of the concerns that were raised here today. As well as some of the suggestions that came out of the fencing and the low fencing and some other options. But ultimately, it's about not having, I mean, first of all, we have two, kind of conflicting or seemingly conflicting concerns. And if they have ideas to resolve that, then obviously, and maybe there may be better experts in that area, maybe. But if they have a real strong understanding of what we're concerned about, I think that I would be comfortable with that.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that the planning commission can, incorporate a condition. I'm thinking potentially something under, if we look at our red line, page 6 of 31, the new condition 14, which is in regard to Chapel Road Master Plan Linear Park. And this is the one that talks about the Parks and Rec Commission. I think that if it was the pleasure of the planning commission, you could add something, and I think like an A section to this resolution that states potentially something as simple as the Parks and Rec Commission shall ensure that safety concerns of the planning commission regarding fencing and people passing between the park and Highway 25 are taken into consideration in their recommendation. And I think that would cover that the Parks and Recreation Commission and staff and the applicant have direction to make sure that is a strong consideration in the review process.
Okay, so let's go back. If there's no further discussion or questions, let's go back to the motion. So I think maybe we can modify the motion, if the vote on it, and then modify it.
You don't have to vote, it wasn't seconded, so, you can vote.
It was seconded by Commissioner Corona.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner Corona seconded it, so we did have a second, and then we had the discussion afterwards, there was a question after.
Is there any modifications to the? Well, what I would suggest is that if you look at the recommended language of the motion, it says accepting all changes proposed, and if we include the change that we just proposed, it would already include that. If that's acceptable, and y'all looking at me like.
I'm thinking that we wanted to, this is, okay, maybe I'll speak for myself, and then I will ask my fellow commissioners to also chime in. That we want to be a little bit more specific as this item moves up, but this goes to the parks folks, and that when they're talking about it and voting on it, that they have a real grasp on what a major concern it was for us. Not just simply like in general, like it's general safety concerns, it's general stuff that maybe they kind of it's understood coming from the planning commission, but I think we want to have further emphasis on that, as well as the ideas of the fencing, but the concerns of, obstructing view and, the aesthetics of it and all of that, that we wanted to be able to balance the two, but more importantly, to just have a real strong emphasis on our concerns around safety, especially because of the location, the shape of it, Highway 25, all of that. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious when you look at it. I'm gonna assume that they are gonna have similar concerns, but I think we want that just to be like a real strong emphasis. Not that they think that, oh, we were okay with everything, so let's just turn it over to them. Business as usual, right? So we want to elevate that a little bit more.
So you want it included in both the motion and the condition?
I think I would like it to be, just so that we have it more, a stronger emphasis on it. So that's my own thought, so I would like to get from everyone else.
Well, and since I made the initial motion and we've had a further discussion, I would be in favor of ensuring to Parks and Recreation, when they go through the linear park review, that our concerns are transferred to their board when they review the application.
So are you amending your motion?
I'm amending my motion to add this discussion and make sure that our concerns are forwarded to the Parks and Recreation Commission.
So can we go forward with the first and second, or do we need to review the first and second?
No, that was his amended first,
Okay.
so then we go over.
And I think that's okay, because we generally don't, make that kind of an amendment, so when we add that additional language to an amendment to a motion, I think the strong concern is sort of understood, right? So I
Yes,
think that's-
and it'll be reflected in the minutes.
And you guys, that understandable to you, the new motion?
Yes, I don't think we'll make. Or we can make an amendment to the condition if I get a nod. But also it'll be reflected in the minutes that your motion is accepting changes proposed, and there is an emphasis on ensuring that the planning commission's concerns about safety are provided to the Parks and Recreation Commission during their review. And
And we could
that'll,
add that verbiage to that condition.
yes,
That
I will
relates to
add
the
it.
Parks and Recreation Commission. I think that would be.
Yes.
very prudent.
we can do exactly both, and that will be reflected in the resolution and the conditions.
I would like to propose to Commissioner Dubois a possible friendly amendment to not only include safety, but also aesthetics. And the emphasis to the parks. If that's an issue, yes. Thank you. So, sounds like, we're calling that friendly amendment to add aesthetics to the concerns.
Would you like Eva to summarize the motion? Just
That
the,
would be great.
okay.
Okay, so I understand the motion to be that the planning commission would adopt resolution 2022-22 approving vesting tentative map 2021-5. Subject to the findings and conditions contained in the red line draft resolution as we discussed, with the addition of a 14A to the Chapel Road Master Plan Linear Park condition of approval that emphasizes and ensures that during the Parks and Rec Commission's review of the proposed linear park improvements, that the planning commission's concerns regarding safety and potential solutions, including a fence or other solutions for safety, as well as aesthetics, are emphasized to the Parks and Recreation Commission and included in their own recommendations on the improvements. And that planning will pass that on. I think. Okay.
Okay,
I approve.
Okay.
I think they'll get our message.
That's some.
We got it.
Okay. Okay, so I think we're ready for a roll call vote.
Commissioner,
Sorry, I just want to make sure, do we need to have a second, like, because of the original motion was amended?
I heard yours to be a second.
Okay.
As Corona, yeah, so we had people to do motion and Corona second. You agree? Okay. Commissioner David Wood,
Yes.
Commissioner Kevin Henderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Commissioner Brennan,
Yes.
Commissioner Stephen Long.
Yes.
Chairperson Roxanne Stevens.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
My person, thank you, Mr. Gomez, and Mr. Smith.
Thank you, not to beat a dead horse, but there is a conditional use permit for this project.
Okay, so do I have, any questions, comments, or, does anybody want to take action on the, second part of this, which is the, on the conditional use permit?
I'll go ahead and make another motion to adopt PC resolution 2022-23,
23.
thank you. And approve plan unit development. Is there another on that? Conditional use permit, I'm sorry, conditional use permit 2022-2 for plan unit development. Including the modifications to the resolutions as outlined in the staff report.
Second, or any further discussion?
Second.
Roll call vote?
Commissioner David Hughes,
Yes.
Commissioner Kevin Henderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Luke Thornton,
Yes.
Commissioner Stephen Long,
Yes.
Chairperson Roxanne Stevens.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Watch the video.
Okay, so let's move on to item number 4. Yeah, is it okay with moving forward if there's anybody needs us to? Okay, let's just go ahead and move on then. We will move on to item number 4. So item number 4 is zoning ordinance amendment 2022-2, City of Hollister. Amendments to the City of Hollister Municipal Code to incorporate changes related to Senate Bill 9, government code sections 66452.6 and 65852.21 and 66411.7. which come into effect January 1, or came into effect January 1, 2022. The changes will bring the municipal code into compliance with the state law and will allow for urban lot splits and 2-unit housing developments within single-family residential zoning districts. Okay, we get a staff report.
To give you a little bit of background, Senate Bill 9 took effect on January 1st, so it is in effect now. The city has to comply with it. The Planning Commission discussed SB 9 during a study session on August 4th, where we went over the law. And following that study session, as part of the density modification that we made to the zoning ordinance, the city council adopted an ordinance to allow duplexes within the R1 zoning district to comply with the requirements of SB 9 on October 3rd in advance of this new chapter that we've developed for the zoning ordinance. To give a little bit more in-depth background, because we do have a new planning commissioner that wasn't at our study session, SB 9 requires approval of a two-unit housing development and urban lot splits. A 2-unit housing development is 2 homes on an eligible single-family residential parcel where there are 2 primary single-family dwelling units on 1 parcel attached or detached. An urban lot split is a one-time subdivision of a single-family residential parcel where it's subdivided into 2 parcels. You can then build 2 units on each parcel. This is a diagram, so you can see some of the options that are available to people. As you look at the pictures, you know, you have a vacant lot, someone could have 1 unit, they can have 2 attached units, they can have 2 detached units. These are the various ways that someone could, let's say, potentially develop their lot if they split it on the bottom. Where you get that 4-unit count. So to kind of go over all of the requirements that the state has given us to process 2-unit housing developments. An application for an SB9 development is ministerial. So that means there's no discretionary review, it's ministerial. They are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. The state says that the setbacks are 4 feet for side and rear. For front yard and street side setbacks, the state does let us follow our own. But if those setbacks preclude the construction of 1 800 square foot second primary dwelling unit, then we have to allow it. And we have to waive our setback requirements for front yard and street side. If the homeowner or applicant or homeowner decide that they want to demolish their existing dwelling unit, if their dwelling unit was constructed with different setbacks, we have to allow those setbacks to continue with the new configuration house, whatever they're trying to do on the site. The dwelling units may be attached as long as they meet building code safety requirements. So that's more where you would see a duplex. And for most cases, you're only required to provide 1 off-street parking space per unit. The state does allow us to restrict short-term rentals. So that would be for a rental of under 30 days, we can limit if we have an ordinance. And if we have an ordinance in place, the city can have some objective design standards regarding the design of the second primary dwelling unit on the site. For urban lot splits, so that is just taking an existing parcel and splitting it. The split must result in lots of approximately equal size, provided that one parcel is not smaller than 40% of the size of the original parcel. In this case, the property owner must intend to occupy one of the units as their principal residence for 3 years. And when the lot is split, if an applicant is going through a lot split, no more than 2 dwelling units are allowed on each lot, which means they can't have an accessory dwelling unit if they were to split the lot. And then the same development standards of setbacks that I mentioned before, those also apply to urban lot splits. So staff has prepared a draft chapter 17.26, which is 2-unit residential developments in urban lot splits for inclusion into the zoning ordinance. And there are several reasons that we've done this. One is when you read the Senate bill, it is very confusing and it is very hard to understand, especially if you are a layperson. And so by enacting a ordinance within our zoning ordinance, we can provide clear language with steps that someone has to follow, with easy to find requirements that they must meet, rather than requiring someone to go through the government code. It also, again, it lets us establish all those development standards. It's a check for us as well as a check for the applicant. We can include design standards, which is something we don't have now. And so a design standard would be that we have in there. It's really to make sure that they're not proposing something so crazy different that you have an attached dwelling unit that maybe one has stucco siding, the other has wood siding, or we have a mission style house with a tile roof and they're attaching, you know, just a wood hardy plank sided with a, you know, asphalt composition shingle on it. So those things, so for the design standards, we can't apply design standards if we don't have an ordinance. So that is one thing to keep in The ordinance also establishes our application submittal requirements and the review procedures. So again, we now have a process for reviewing them and someone can clearly see how we're going to review them and what they need to submit. Without an ordinance, there are two things that we couldn't require, but we are allowed to if we have an ordinance. So one is an affidavit for the lot split, to require them to use it as their principal residence for a minimum of 3 years. And then the other one is a deed restriction to prohibit future lot splits. So if someone were to split their lot, a deed restriction would go on those two lots, letting any future owners know that they wouldn't be allowed to split it again. So they would be aware of it when they purchase the property. Not on here, but also with the ordinance, we've established that they won't be able to rent these out for short-term rentals, so it will be in our code. So although it's not required, a city can implement an ordinance related to SB 9 in order to establish requirements for the review and approval of a 2-unit residential development in the city. If we didn't adopt an ordinance, we still have to allow them, but they follow the government code, which doesn't give us those other things such as the affidavit, the deed restriction, and the design standards. By including this chapter in our ordinance, we can establish clear and easy to understand requirements. Again, when you read the government code, it is very confusing. It's not user-friendly. It's hard for almost everyone to understand what is in there, and this makes it a lot easier on the residents in the city. And then once again, by adopting this, we will have design standards and submittal requirements that would otherwise not be codified if the city only relied on state law. So for tonight, the Planning Commission has 3 options. One is to adopt a resolution recommending City Council adoption of Chapter 17.26. One is adopt the resolution, but make modifications to the draft ordinance. And then the third would be to continue the hearing if you so chose to, and staff is recommending option 1 on this. I'm sure you have questions. I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Erica. Any questions?
Yes.
Commissioner Henderson, go ahead.
So you mentioned use the word ministerial, meaning exactly, review from the planning commission.
Correct.
Okay. And that's just because the discussion based on the dual.
So this is in the government code. It's specifically ministerial. So it's like a building permit. You check it against specific requirements, doesn't meet the setbacks, doesn't meet these design standards we've established. Do they have the deed restriction? And then it gets approved. We can't have any discretionary consideration over it.
So in the process, the review process, it would go to planning to check the affidavit and the deed restriction and the design, and then go over to building.
Yes. So this state has limited what we can do on purpose because they want to encourage this type of, let's say, construction to add more units. So we can establish a process, we can establish those minimum things that we can do, but that's it.
Any questions? Okay, I'm just wanting to get like a process question or clarification, process clarification. So the specific language that will go into this ordinance has not been developed yet. Is that correct?
No, it has. It's included as Exhibit A to your resolution. It's the draft chapter.
I guess okay, maybe I missed it, but I didn't see anything, any like design specific, did I?
So So I gotta go to the page.
2605.
So if you go into, so starting on page 4, we go into the development standards. So there we have the minimum unit size, which the state says it has to be, we have to allow 800. Then we have lot coverage is going to be the same as our zoning district, but again, if it precludes an SB9, the state says we have to allow it. But if it, an 800 square foot unit, but you know, if they were putting an 800 square foot unit on their parcel, then we can, then lot coverage comes into play. It's very confusing. Unit height D is the same as the maximum height of the zoning district in which they're located. And then the setbacks, again, most of those come from the state. They said 4 feet side and rear. Front setback coverage, that's something that we've imposed as a design guideline. That's to prevent someone from paving over their entire front yard, which when, you know, there's a number of reasons why that's not a good thing, but we need pervious surface as well as landscaping in the front yard. Street access is another thing that we put in there to ensure that someone can actually get to their unit. That's not in the code, so it's not something we could check against, but we've included it in here because we don't want someone to have a unit that they can't actually really access easily, especially if it's going because they can be sold off. For design, we have all new units shall have the same architectural style, detail, coloring, and building materials as the existing primary dwelling unit. Where 2 units are proposed on a parcel created through an urban lot split, the 2 new units on said parcel shall have the same architectural style, detail, color, and materials.
Okay. I did miss that.
And then there's more, but on the following page. I don't know if you want me to read them all.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I obviously did not read that part for you, no? But I was just, the reason I just asked that question, because I know that we've had some discussions before, so we've had different opinions about, you know, the look of something, and so what I was hoping is that we're not arbitrarily like imposing some kind of aesthetics on, especially homeowners who just find their like, I don't know, just add a unit or something, so I just wanna, so I appreciate that, I just put out the language, I just wanted to make that comment. Okay. So let's move then to public comment, if there aren't any other questions or comments from my fellow commissioners. So let's go to public comment at 7:59.
I have no speakers.
So I'm gonna close public comment at 7:59. And check in with politicians, do we need further discussion? Does anybody want to propose an action on this item?
Steve, you want to take a shot? Or I'll go ahead and make a motion. Madam Chair, if I may, I'd like to make a motion for zoning ordinance amendment 2022 is that we adopt option number 1. PC resolution associated with option number 1.
It will be 2022-24.
Adopt PC resolution 2022-24. Option number 1.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call vote. Commissioner David Tebow,
Yes.
Commissioner Glenn Henderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Luke Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Stephen Long.
Yes.
Chairperson Roxanne Stephen. Yes. Motion carries unanimously.
And so I just wanted to, little caveat to my motion, if I may, is design standards. You know, and I appreciate your concern with with the applicant who wants ADU for his aging mothers.
Right.
Relative, as long as you match the existing materials, you know, as a basic principle, I think we're on the right line.
Right, I
So
mean,
the main house, if it's flat siding and the composition table roof, you do an ADU detached
well, yeah, ADUs have different,
materials.
there's a different law for ADUs, there's different things we have to do with that. This is just, this is SB9, yeah.
I think you understand my.
Yeah.
Just. Thank you.
Okay, so getting to the agenda, we have a couple items left, so let's move on to item number 5, zoning ordinance amendment 2022-3, City of Hollister. Amendments to the zoning ordinance related to section 17.24.190, site and architectural review, and 17.24.340, plan development permits, and the adoption of a new chapter, residential design standards. Staff report?
The staff report's gonna be Erica as well. I just wanted to state and apologize if I just found that item 5 was missing from my physical packet. It was available in the digital packet, of course, and all the digital materials the planning commission got, but I apologize if it was not in your hard copy. We print a lot of things on packet day.
Yeah, it was in the digital.
Okay.
So again, because we have a new commissioner, we've previously spoken about the zoning ordinance overhaul. I'm just going to give a brief overview. So phase 1, there's 3 phases of our zoning ordinance overhaul. Phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Phase 1 is the phase that we're in now, and really what it is trying to amend the most critical portions of the zoning ordinance right now, and those are the sections of our zoning ordinance which does not comply with state law. So we had SB9. We had SB9 before, and we're working on density bonus and accessory dwelling. Oh my gosh, accessory dwelling units. And we discussed those during a study session, but we're currently working on amending sections. Density bonus, as you may recall, is very out of date and very inconsistent. So that long section of the zoning ordinance that you see now, we've had to totally rewrite it. ADU is also out of date, and so it required a lot of modifications. We were very close to being done, and the state issued about 40 new laws, several of which amended those 2 sections further. So we had to put a pause on that while we reconfigured what we'd already done. So phase 1 is still in process. As part of those 40 bills that they passed, we are still checking our zoning ordinance to see if anything else needs to be amended at this time too. We're hoping that this phase of the zoning ordinance overhaul is completed around February of this year. It could push a little longer depending on our review of everything else that's going on. Phase 2 is to be comprised of site and architectural review and design guidelines. If you recall, we had mentioned that we needed to change the site and architectural review because it was very confusing. It was hard for us to use. It doesn't explicitly state what needs a permit, which every zoning ordinance should actually do so that it's easy for everyone to understand. And the city is working on comprehensive design guidelines, and those will include things like commercial, mixed use, multifamily, home, office, and there might be one other that I can't remember off the top of my head. And then there's phase 3, although this says phase 2. Phase 3 is the complete overhaul of the zoning ordinance. This is what we will be discussing at subsequent study sessions. This involves every word in the zoning ordinance. Everything will be redone. So that's obviously a much longer process that we're going through. The first 2 phases, though, we identified as being more immediate at this point, and then we'll work on the 3rd phase. With phase two, when we discussed it during our joint study session with the city council, we mentioned that we were just looking at those design guidelines and site and architectural review. When we started reviewing it, we realized that it's going to require us to overhaul the entirety of the permitting section of the zoning ordinance. So that will be things like variances, plan unit developments, administrative permits, the whole thing. The problem is that when we change one thing, the way this zoning ordinance is set up is that everything relates to one another, and some sections, for some reason, refer to sections of other permits that then refer to sections of other permit requirements. And if we just did site and architectural review, it'll make everything more confusing, and we don't want to do that. So what we're doing tonight is what we're calling phase 2A. And that is just to look at a minor change to site and architectural review and a minor change to plan unit development. And then also some design standards. We will come back to you and we'll review it in study session because it is going to be a significant change to the zoning ordinance. We'll review this whole portion of the zoning ordinance with you, and probably one, or I'm going to guess more than one study session. And then we would, move forward from there for adoption as the final phase of phase 2. So what we're recommending tonight is kind of a small fix for us. We are having some issues in the city right now where the current zoning ordinance states that site and architectural review is not required for residential developments in the R1. This has been interpreted to mean single family. There are single family developments in other zoning districts. We have our performance overlay zoning district, we have west of Fairview, and the interpretation has been just single family in R1. So most of the single family residential that's going on right now is not reviewed by the planning commission or staff or anyone. The design is reviewed at building permit phase. So nobody gets to see the design until then. We have very limited things we can say because a building permit is a ministerial review. And with that, staff is having a number of issues. We are having architecture that's maybe not the standard that we'd like to see. Staff is spending a significant amount of time working with developers. There's no conditions of approval related to a site and architectural review. So there's a number of issues that are going on. So one of the amendments that we're requesting tonight is to change that to no building permit for a new single family residential development of more than 2 residential dwellings, because we can't require one for SB9, would require site and architectural review. So that would be in line with what we're doing with multifamily. And some of our single family developments are quite large. Just to give you some, would that, if we required site and architectural review, would that be inconsistent with most cities in California? And actually not. Most cities require design review of single family residential developments, but I went and looked at what are the surrounding cities so we can get a better picture or a better idea of what's going on around us. So for example, for San Juan Bautista, its project's over 1,000 square feet. And so that's capturing additions as well as new developments. For Gilroy, they require it for 4 or more dwelling units. For Greenville, they require it for single family developments as well as additions on houses over 500 square feet above the first floor. San Benito County has 2 different categories for things within the county. It's minor is 10 or fewer, and that's reviewed by the planning director. Major is 10 or more, and that goes to the planning commission. Watsonville requires planning commission. Morgan Hill is 3 or more new residential units. Soledad is on any lot, so even a brand new one house, a custom lot would require it. And then Salinas is the only one I could find that does not require review by the city. They do something called like a site plan, but it's administrative and it didn't make a whole lot of sense. But it's literally just the layout on a site of the house. So if we required site and architectural review for residential developments, we are actually in line with most of the cities around us. One of the other things that we are asking you to include now is a list of established findings. In your resolution, every time we do something, you have findings and staff has to prove why we're approving something. There's two reasons for that. One is it leaves a clear legal record for why we approved a project should something ever arise. The second is, and you maybe recall when we were talking about KB and I looked back at the findings for the tentative map and nobody mentioned the lot sizes, so I couldn't figure out what happened there. But when we completely discuss a project in the findings, that helps people 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road to figure out why we did what we did. And it really helps us out later on. And you, if you ever had to review something similar or an amendment to something. So what we've come up with is 6 findings that we would apply to projects. And again, then this is also in our zoning ordinance. So a developer can clearly see what we're looking for when staff's approving a project through the director or when you are approving a project. The second amendment that we're discussing tonight is to planned unit development, and that is to require a site and architectural review with the planned development request. The reason that we are recommending this is because the way it works now is someone comes to you with a tentative map and asks for revised development standards. You don't know what it looks like. You don't know what it looks like on the lot when they're discussing setbacks. You are approving a table of the development standards and the layout of all the lots in a development. The purpose of a planned unit development is to encourage unique developments, a mix of housing types, attractive developments, something that otherwise wouldn't be allowed under the zoning ordinance. And when you think of tonight where the request was the 10-foot setback for a porch, that's actually a very unique and good idea that activates a sidewalk, that creates a neighborhood. That's a good idea. But what we would like to see is that the design of the houses comes along with the planned unit development. So you can also see what you're approving when someone requests this. So you have the picture of the house, let's say, along with the setback, and it really speaks to what the project will look like when it's done. This wouldn't necessarily be a hardship if we are requiring a site and architectural review for a single family residential development, because they would have to do it anyways, and they would just go along together at the hearing where you're looking at those items. This is the wrong language. So to speak to that, my computer likes to, since I don't have this set before. So what we'd also like to do to further iterate why we're approving planned developments. We're asking for a finding. And the finding would be the.
We don't have the right one.
We don't have, hold on. I have the right one.
Sorry.
Here we go. Okay, the finding would be, the proposed project would offer a distinguishable public benefit such as additional open space or landscaping, public art or art through innovative architecture or site layout, unique uses not typically permitted within the underlying zoning district, contribution to or construction of significant offsite public improvements or community space or similar in exchange for any modifications from the standard zoning requested by the plan development. And a PD is a discretionary review, so the planning commission has the ability to decide what they felt would comply with this condition, this finding, as well as there are other findings within this, such as, they have to be consistent with the general plan. If CEQA is required, they obviously have to get CEQA. We also have one that says the proposed development would be harmonious and compatible with existing and future developments within the zoning district and general area, as well as land uses presently on this subject property. So there are other minor modifications that we're recommending to this, but it's mostly to fix a few errors, and the same with site and architecture. There's a few errors within both of these where we're just kind of cleaning them up now. And fixing the formatting because the formatting is off in our zoning ordinance. The big one for tonight is we're asking for a new chapter, and that would be chapter 17.30 residential design standards. Right now, the city does not have design standards for anything really. I mean, we have landscaping, we have some other requirements, but we don't have design standards. SB 35 and SB 330 only allow a city to adopt objective design standards when it comes to residential. That's to prevent a city from imposing requirements that are very hard to follow, are so arbitrary that it precludes development. They're telling us that we can only apply objective design standards. So we have come up with objective design standards. And again, the reason that we'd like this now is because during the single family building permit phase right now, we are seeing residential developments that are not very attractive. They're not well designed. They don't really fit in with the character of the city. We think that we deserve better. We'd like to see it happen. These are not onerous. These are things that you find in almost every other city. Most cities right now are adopting objective design standards, especially all the cities around us, to kind of aid planners and the city in the review. So someone can't tell us that we can't say we'd like to see a redesign. We can point specifically to one of the things that we have listed in there and tell them specifically why we wouldn't recommend approval of them. These standards that we've developed, while they are temporary, they're only temporary in the sense that they'll get wrapped into our design guidelines once they're done. That requires just a significant amount of work on staff, and that's why this phase is taking us so long. But right now we're at a point where we feel like we can't wait. Once those design guidelines are, let's say, adopted by the city, this comprehensive design guidelines, these guidelines would be wrapped in, and then because they'd be a standalone document at that point, we get to do things like include photographs, which really, explain what this standard means or what we're trying to avoid, or other things within that that become more advantageous for developers as well as staff. But at this point, our only option is something in the code because we can't complete that design guidelines yet because it's taking such a significant amount of work. So the chapter was drafted for you. It's, I guess, in the online version. I don't know if you have any questions on it, but in conclusion, staff is proposing these modifications to promote better development and design of single family and multifamily residential developments in the city. By requiring a site and architectural review, the city will be able to review the project for compliance with all requirements of the zoning ordinance, review the design for consistency with any adopted design guidelines, review the proposed landscaping, and place conditions of approval on the project when necessary. By requiring that a plan development request is combined with a site and architectural review, the city will be able to ensure that the development is attractively designed and innovative innovative or provide a unique amenity in exchange for the modification that they are requesting. And by adopting the objective design standards, the city will ensure that single-family and multifamily developments are attractively designed and reinforce the small town character of Hollister. The planning commission has three options. They're very long, but one is to adopt a resolution recommending city council approval of all the amendments that we've discussed tonight. The second would be to adopt a resolution recommending approval of the amendments with any changes that you might have. And the third would be to continue the hearing and direct us to provide additional information or clarification. And staff is recommending that you select option one and approve the zoning ordinance amendments. And that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Erica. Commissioner Boyd?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Couple things. When we, and I understand having objective design standards is very helpful reviewing a single family residential design. My advice is it'd be helpful to the applicant to have this review at a conceptual design stage, rather than the applicant goes through all the engineering, seismic calculations, you know, all the foundation engineering and all that. Because if there's anything that does not meet objective standards, it's not do all that to that, bringing it to its design where it's engineered, it just be painstaking sometimes to make significant revisions.
Correct. And in Hollister, we have you can apply for a preliminary review of your project, of any project. And you could apply and say, what do you think of my design? And you'll get comments from us. You could apply for, what do you think of my planned unit development? And you'll get comments from us. So that's meant to be a preliminary phase where you can work through your project before you've submitted. So we don't run into, we're telling you, oh, your use isn't allowed here. You're single family residential in an industrial zoning district, for example, or, oh, you're proposing neon pink houses. We don't think that that's appropriate. So you would get those preliminary comments from us.
We understand, as long as the applicant is aware and mindful that at some point before he gets too far into this project, that he needs to go through a preliminary review. I'm not sure how that can be communicated, but that I think that if you could find a mechanism to communicate to the applicant that before it gets too far in design development, then he needs to go through a review with the city.
Yeah, so we definitely, in kind of our standard response to inquiries that we get for potential larger projects or really any project that's going to require some kind of review by the planning department, we are always recommending a preliminary review. But even if an applicant didn't go through the preliminary process with us, adopting these objective design standards, as Erica mentioned, they're quote unquote temporary, because we would still in the rest of phase 2 and into phase 3 be revisiting these as the whole zoning ordinance is revisited. But adopting these, they'll be codified, available to the public and to potential applicants, and they will be going through site and architectural review, which is, it's not quite preliminary concept, but it's also much before structural building permit engineered concept. And so we're proposing 2 levels of site and architectural review, one at a director level, unless it's accompanied by another permit that would come to the planning commission anyway, like a map plan development, multifamily site and architectural review that comes to the planning commission. So but it would be objective standards for staff and the applicant to review during this process we're proposing that doesn't currently exist.
And regarding the objective standards, when do you think you'll have a draft on what those objective standards are? or the proposed.
They're included as exhibit C to your resolution.
Yes, and on the planning commissions, all of your computers, if you minimize the PowerPoint on your actual computer, you have the folders open and you can open them. I can also stop the share of the PowerPoint if you'd like and pull up that.
Can we go to exhibit C?
Yeah, give me 1 second for everyone online watching and I'll pull that up. Share the screen for a second.
So if you want me to walk you through it. So we started off the chapter with purpose, and it's really, why do we have these design standards? What are we trying to achieve? So we've come up with several in here. I mean, I think the most important is enhancing architectural character and scale of neighborhoods. We want multifamily dwellings to activate the street on which they're located on. So that's through balconies, porches, whatever you want to call them on the second and above. It's doors facing streets. It's little, they wanted to have a plaza. There's a number of things, and it's in the design guidelines. But so we've come up with some design standards for single family detached and the duets. And so obviously they would have to meet the development standards of the zoning district in which they're located in. We have the requirement for different architectural styles. And we're looking specifically for when you look at KB, for example, we have those 4 different styles. What we're looking for from style to style really is, we don't want all the windows to be the same. We don't want all the windows and all the doors and they just change the color. So we've come up with, they pick from these, but you know, we want them to think about changing the window styles. We want them to think about between them, are the roofs different? We don't want everything, let's say, having a flat roof in a development.
You know, what would be really helpful, like, talk about neighborhood conformity and massing and all that, is to have graphics that go along with with the narrative.
We will have more in the design guidelines when it's the full document, and you'll get to see amazing pictures and everything.
Yes.
With the zoning ordinance, obviously we can't, you get, you know, like a AutoCAD, that's basically what you get. It's not very helpful in this case. This is temporary because we've identified a problem and we don't want to wait for this phase, let's say 2B now to be done. We don't want, we want to do it correctly. And if it takes a year, we don't want to lose a year where we're getting a year's worth of, let's say, bad designs. Because when a structure is built, it is most likely going to look like that for over 100 years or longer. And if a bad design is approved, it's a bad design for probably ever. So that's what we're trying to achieve at this point. And so I understand what you're saying. Pictures, I think, are more helpful in most cases than words, but we're stuck with words at this point. So the next thing you see will have words and pictures.
So this will start the process if we go on with this amendment. And then down the line, you'll be able to develop these objective design standards and embellish them with graphics, and so it makes it more understandable. When we do it as a applicant, we can say this is done. And have
Yes,
these objective design standards available to the applicant, just as a supplementary material and goes through this design.
correct. So the way the design guidelines that we're going to have, so I'm going to use commercial as an example. So for commercial developments, we have massing, paint colors, activation of streets, pedestrian walkways. What does articulation, how, like your facade has to have breaks, window design, like there's a number of things that go into that. Again, we are limited, the state has limited us on residential, so where we can be more subjective for commercial. Residential has to be objective, so it's a list of requirements and it's like, did they meet it? Did they meet it? No, they didn't, and that's where we're stuck with that.
Thank you. Are there questions from fellow commissioners? Okay. So let's move then to public comment on this item. 8:31.
I do have a speaker card for item 5 for Ann Hall.
And Hall, it's gonna be in here. Good evening. I had a question. If this is approved tonight, when does it take effect? And how does it apply to subdivisions where the map has already been approved, but not all the houses are built?
So if I can answer it, the planning commission is only making a recommendation to the city council. The city council would ultimately adopt if they chose to.
And if it were adopted, how would it apply to kind of maps that have been approved, but not all the houses have been built?
So it depends on what stage of entitlement it's in, so if it's already in construction, kind of what we're talking about, then it would not apply for that, so anything that was to come before, to anything new would be subject to the new, ordinances or changes to the ordinance.
Okay, I mean, just because, you have a map that went through the development process, but it can take 4 or 5 years for all the homes to be built. So those building applications are still going in, for the next year.
I should actually check with the chairperson, see if she wants me to engage in conversation with the comments of the public speaker.
I think it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we are kind of going way to the document there as great and concise. No problem, it's just like, I said, there are a number of projects I can think of where the map entitlements have been approved. But the houses themselves could take 3 or 4 years to build out. So there's building applications that have yet to go into the building department. So will they still be reviewed under the old way, which is they just go through planning to check against the elevation requirements, or will they be subjected to the newer requirements?
In general, they would be subject to new requirements, if they're subject to new requirements, so not knowing specific, it's hard to say whether or not they'd be subject to these requirements, but if they are subject to them, they would be expected.
If they're single family homes, which up till now have not been, had to go through site architecture. For example, I mean, to be specific, Silver Oaks has long been approved. The building applications are still coming in, they go through planning for review right now for things like setbacks, everything on the plot plans. With that change, and with phase 4, and the later phases, have to have some type of site architectural review.
And if you are more familiar with that project in particular, or what stage it's in, that would be helpful, but I don't think I can answer specifically about a project.
So those types of projects have master plans that have been approved through the planning department and building department, and those master plans are being applied to their CUPs and setbacks. I don't think that the master plans would be subject back through to this requirement, though if there was a map, I think what Jennifer's saying, if there's a map and it doesn't necessarily have the masters at this point, it would be potentially subject to this requirement. But it is the resolution, it does have a difference between a staff level, a director level site and architectural review and a planning commission type site and architectural review. So that depending on the project, but for single families, we're recommending generally a staff level site and architectural review to check these design guidelines. not go back to the planning commission with a map that's already approved. If that helps answer your question.
So I'm gonna just kind of put a time out just because the clock's not ticking anymore and we're waiting for the children to time. It's been later. We have another item. We have people waiting. So I would like to wrap this up. And my suggestion is to state your concerns. I think some kind of a transitional plan as this is going into effect will be really crucial, but I think that that's something that the city is gonna have to decide, because these ordinances have to be updated, so there's gonna have to be some transition towards that. So for those projects that are already in the works, and so I think that there's has to be consideration for that, but I think stating your concerns at a city council meeting and this is being adopted would be really important. And you've obviously stated them now, so I think okay, thank you. Any other speaker cards?
Let me just check what on, sorry. Nice, all over the place here. I have no other speakers on this side.
Okay, so I'm gonna close the public hearing at 8:36. And then check back in with the commissioners. Any further discussion, anybody would like to move forward with action?
So I think the speaker brought up a concern, that I believe kind of shows that we probably need to do a little bit more work, specifically how to handle, when that is already in the process. So I would, entertain a motion for a action to you. I'd like to make a motion for that. That's my thought. I said I'm not making a motion at this time, but that was my concern. That means there's options.
So, yeah, so here I'm sort of not really wanting to do that either, but sort of moving along that line, along those lines. And not only, well, this is a good point, and I appreciate the comment by Ms. Paul. But I am also concerned that we didn't have this in our packet, and I'm not sure whether that's confusing to other commissioners if they're not typically reading digital folders, which typically reading the hard copy. So I just was a little bit concerned about that as well. But I do think that there was a lot of information that we provided Erica as a clarifying information. And maybe it does need a little bit more work. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure yet which way I'm leaning, but I'm kind of thinking that maybe there needs to be a little bit more time. Maybe we need to look at this item next for more information. And I think transition planning would be an important piece in that.
So if you chose to, sorry to interrupt, if you chose to, you could, as part of your recommendation, recommend that the council establish a standard for when to like what project, or how to apply this to what project. So for example, the standard could be if someone has applied for master planned, has applied for their master plans for their building permit, which is, that is what all the houses look like, and we are in review now, or they are in review before this ordinance takes effect, they get to keep going for however many units they have in that development. It could be 500, whatever it is, but all those units that are under this master plan, master development plan that we've been reviewing, they get to keep going. We do have maps that are approved by the city, and we do not see anything on those maps for 10, 15 years. And so for something like that, where maybe they got their map approved 10 years ago, and they are now coming to the city, let's say in a year or two, This would then apply, but that would be as you would maybe direct it to the city council. If you
As
wanted
an
to,
option.
as an option.
If I may just get a picture I have is correct, is that if we adopt this amendment, once it goes and it's codified, then all projects that are that are going through the initial application after the codification of this amendment would have to go through this process. But if the project has already been initiated before the amendment, then it's based on what's on the books now.
Correct. So if they, let's do Robert's or KB's single family home. So she talked about it tonight. Again, it's west of Fairview, but even though it says R1, his interpretation was for some reason that it's single family detached. So they went straight to building permit. They're in building permit review right now. They get to keep going. We've seen their master development plan. They're not even through building permits. They're not done with it at all. That's where they are right now. And so you could make the direction that if you chose to, that if it's in building permit now, it gets to stay in building permit and they're fine.
Yeah, and this would lean into kind of staff's outlined option two, but that timing is truly subject to the planning commission, ultimately the council, but your recommendation, you could make that timing recommendation, whatever you think is appropriate for the council to consider.
Let me double check. Questions or comments? Okay. What would you, fellow commissioners, like to do? How would you like to proceed on this? I'm open to hear the motion or have further ideas for how to move forward.
It's logic, right? That's still options in front to make sure I have a clear understanding of
Okay.
my fellow commissioners, so are they clear on what these options are?
I'm leaning more towards three, but I can see where the option one, as it's not even in place. So it's a lot of lots of diagrams.
Oh, I think it's important. I think that, like, we need to have some type of design review on single family residential. And I mean, we could continue this, more, because I'm still digesting this.
Yeah,
myself.
and I think we'll just have to be really clear, and I want to try to move us along in this. So we get to the old business, we have people waiting, that we are clear what is the additional information that we're asking for. So like, first of all, I think just going over this again will be really helpful. I think having a little bit more time for us commissioners to maybe think about this in a different way. I think when I read it, it was just seemed like, oh, it's basic, but as we're having this discussion, other things are occurring to me, maybe we do need more time. But I want to make sure that we're not just throwing it back to staff, that we're really clear on what additional information are we asking them to provide, so that the next time we're not in the same situation. So let's be clear what that additional information is. I'm okay with, I would be okay with continuing it as long as we have some clear direction for staff on what additional information we're looking for. So, how do we want to proceed? So, back of it. So I definitely think that just I appreciate the information that you're providing, Erica, and what I think for me is, rather than having kind of like examples, I think we should be some more clear, information about what that transition would look like for those people that are already in process. And permit, like maybe some major decision making points or points in the process, like this major action in the process. At what point then do we draw that line? And then they're not subject to these changes, but they are subject to the changes. I think that would be really helpful, maybe a timeline, maybe a flow chart. I don't know, something that shows that rather than just having examples today. I think that would be really.
If I can ask for clarification, when you say, are you looking at what is the process for someone to go through and get approval? Or are you
So
looking for?
The
if the-
example of the permit process might be a place.
Yeah,
Then we also gave the example of somebody who applied for something 10 years ago that hasn't really moved forward on the project. So those are kind of things, I think that having like a clear, like language around where that is so that it is more clear for applicants when they will be subjected to changes, especially when they're mid-process, whatever that is, right?
mhm.
Permit process, they've already broke ground on parts of the project, they haven't finished, they're still applying for, applications for other home, like, where would they be subjected to that? So, and I think that having that written down somewhere so we can read it, having some visuals, that would be really helpful. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not
Okay.
proposing the motion quite yet, but that's what I'm saying.
If we chose to continue, I can definitely list it out. Unfortunately, like everything in the state does preclude us on certain things, and so I can't account for everything.
Mhm.
And there are certain court cases that have ruled when someone has a vested right, and that changes from project to project.
Mhm.
So, I can do basic examples, but it's really not gonna cover everyone.
It's gonna, I think it is going forward to have like at least a baseline set, and then as we move forward, as things get challenged, and then we move the needle one other way or the other way because of maybe decisions from a court or maybe other subsequent decisions or amendments, I think that's okay, but I think we have to start. I think it's important that we start somewhere so that there is some direction around where that is, and as we are making it, it's clear that there's a lot of confusion. So I think everybody's feeling nervous about this, voting on this, and then having applicants subjected to a lot of things that are not clear. So we want to try to avoid that whenever possible. And we know that we can't account for everything, but we should start somewhere.
I think we can, if the motion ultimately is to continue, and this is part of the additional information that's requested in the motion. I think we can outline kind of some, starting at a planning entitlement, or I guess we'll start with what's submitted with planning now, what the planning commission has approved, if they've submitted to engineering and that's under review, if they have civil type approvals, if they have building permits submitted, if they have building permit approved, if they're under construction. Those are kind of the phases I'm thinking that a project could be in, and then we can look at recommendations
Okay.
for the planning commission, if that's the motion.
Well, I think I'll attempt to make a motion.
Thank you.
So I make a motion that we continue to hearing and direct staff to provide additional information or clarification regarding what happens with applicants that are already in various stages of the process.
For discussion or a second?
Oh, and if there's, I'm sorry, if there's anything ambiguous about what I said, please say now. Thank you.
Any comments Any further clarification that we need, Mr. Miller, and just making it for on this motion. Okay, well, I'm gonna second it. I'm gonna roll call vote.
Commissioner David Duvall,
Yes.
Commissioner Kevin Henderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Luke Cronin,
Yes.
Commissioner Stephen Bond,
Yes.
Chairperson Roxanne Stevens.
Yes,
Motion carried unanimous.
okay, thank you for that. Okay, we're gonna do I'm really sorry, we're gonna do it like a quick 4 minute coffee break.
4 minutes.
4 minutes. So 8:55 instead of that.
Item number 2, do we hand these out?
have them all, but if it's.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and get that, back on the record and, move on to old business item number 1. Old business item number 1, minor subdivision, wedding 18-3 extension. Alan Brookshire on August 25th, 2022 planning commission meeting. The commission granted a 90-day extension to minor subdivision 2018-3, which extended the approval of the project entitlement to December 27th, 2022 to prepare a CEQA initial study to review the utility pole located in the alley. So, with the staff. And can you just tell us what was passed out to us during that short break?
Yes, during the short break, I received paper, it looks like the plan sets and a document from the applicants for old business item 2. So old business item 1, as mentioned, really quickly, a little bit of background. On August 25th, the planning commission heard a item regarding a 1-year extension for minor subdivision 2018-3 at 221 Hawkins Street. On the slide, I have the original approvals and the expiration dates of those subsequent approvals. And the project was set to expire on September 28th of this year. So during the August 25th meeting, that there was an extension being heard. In June of 2022, at the regular planning commission meeting, there was an amendment approved by the planning commission to remove a requirement to underground a utility pole. That was a part of the original conditions of approval. On August, staff's analysis and recommendation was that as amended with the utility pole undergrounding removed, it's inconsistent with the goals and policies of the general plan, and that the project would require further CEQA analysis. As a result, we did recommend denial. However, the planning commission made a motion to continue the hearing and provide the applicant with a 90-day extension, direct staff to initiate a CEQA initial study, and provide staff with the findings to draft a resolution approving the minor subdivision. I'm sorry, that's supposed to say with, but with conditions of approval modified by the planning commission within that time frame. The applicant has been working with staff to assist with the preparation of the CEQA analysis as directed by the planning commission. There were some delays wholly on the side of the city, and the initial study is actively underway. Staff is concerned that it might not be complete in time for the December 15th planning commission meeting, which is the last regular meeting before that 90-day extension would expire on December 27th of this year. Staff doesn't believe that the intent of the adopted motion was to have the project expire while this analysis was being completed. We're requesting clarification from the planning commission for that reason. We understand as staff the adopted motion to do 2 things. Firstly, grant a 90-day extension before the item would be brought back for reconsideration, the item being an extension request. And then it directed staff and the applicant to prepare the CEQA document and finding for the project. We're requesting a consensus about the intention of the motion from the majority of the planning commission. Our questions to you are, was 90 days an arbitrary time frame to complete the CEQA analysis, which was arguably the more important concept in the motion? And if so, would the commission give staff the authority to keep working on the CEQA analysis that's underway if it does extend past December 27th, which is the 90-day time frame? And if the commission does authorize additional time to implement the motion if needed, staff is recommending no later than February 16th. We think that that's over an estimate, but if the commission's intention was to allow time for the analysis to be complete, we don't want the project to expire while that review is being done. So that's purely a request for clarification.
Okay, so I remember when this came about, I remember this item from a while back, but I don't believe that we asked for 90 days just because for a specific reason. I think we had some information. We thought that would be enough time. So I don't know that we were so like rigidly stuck on the 90 days. That's sort of my memory. I think that was just a suggested time frame, so we kind of went with it, if I'm remembering correctly. So anyway, that I'm looking at you two because I think both of you were for this item when I heard it. If you are remembering it in the same way.
Is there any public comment on this?
I don't know, I mean, we're asking them to questions.
Yeah, I would just like to know if there's any public comment.
Right, I'll be honest with you, on the 90 days, I really don't know when that's when you made the motion, right? I might have made the motion, and so I'd be wrong. I don't know when the 90 days, I don't know when the threshold would start. I mean, but I guess that was never really clarified at the time the motion was made.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move to public comment. At 9:01.
The first speaker I have is Ian. Actually, no, let me see.
And Holmes and new engineering, I'm here on behalf of the applicant. I believe the 90 days was a recommendation by staff. The original recommendation was for denial, but when the planning commission upheld our request to go forward with it, staff indicated that they felt a SEQA document and SEQA would be needed and asked for 90 days to complete the SEQA. As you mentioned, there seems to have been some delay in doing that SEQA work. The applicant was finally informed of a final number and paid $14,000 for that SEQA work on November, or was informed on November 2nd. He paid it on November 7th, so he paid within 5 days of having been told about it, but that means it only got started as of 10 days ago. We are anxiously awaiting this to be done. I understand the need to ask for an extension because 90 days was the time frame approved at the time of the meeting. So we're in support of the extension staff is asking for. But we would also ask that this be completed as quickly as possible. We have been waiting since August already. We would like to get this done, and the applicant has paid his money. And although we fully understand the request for extension, we also request that it happen as quickly as possible. Do you have any questions for me?
So you have to know why it wasn't until November early this month that the applicant was told about this SEQA requirement.
We were aware of the SEQA requirement at the meeting, but we did not have we were not really in discussion as to what fees would be needed for that until late October. Any other speaker cards?
No more speaker cards, just give me one moment. No more speakers.
Okay, so we're gonna close public comment at 9:04. And that's this item. Okay, so let's try to move through this quickly so that we can go to the second whole business item. So I think what we just need to do is we need to decide whether whether we want to give the extension and then for how long. And okay, so let me hear from anybody on the commission if you have any comments or questions about that. Or if anybody has a motion that they'd like to.
If I have a question. Initially, what was the actual cause for the doing?
So the Staff went out after the meeting to Kimley Horn, who does our extension of staff, CEQA, specifically to get a scope of work for traffic analysis. So that was prepared during September, and I believe, I don't have the exact date, but I believe we got that in early October. And honestly, it was just a delay on staff's end coordinating. It's been kind of me, Adriana, and Erica working in together, but emails back and forth with Kimley Horn, and on it was just busyness, and we didn't get that out to the applicant, like Anne mentioned, for a few weeks, like 3 weeks. We had it kind of at the beginning of October, and it took us some time to turn it around to the applicant, which was no fault of the applicant. And then at the end of October, we did a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of modification on the scope with the applicant. And then, as she mentioned, they just paid recently. And it was right around the time that we had both finalized that scope 5 days after. So there was a delay in us turning that scope back to the applicant.
Okay. So, my question is, how quickly could you get this done? So you said, you know, on one of the, one of the bullets, it says that you didn't believe that February 16th, it would go past February 16th, to what would you use?
So
time?
ideally, we would be bringing it on December 15th. It's just that because of the holidays gets noticed to the newspaper on Tuesday, no later than Tuesday of next week. And I have to coordinate. So Erica is writing the initial study as in-house staff, and Kimley Horn is preparing just the traffic portion, the modeling. Kimley Horn's scope says that they should take 2 weeks to do that. And Erica shouldn't need much longer than that to read the report and incorporate it. But that cuts us real close to December 15th. And without a special hearing after that, this 90 days expires on the 27th. I see us going in January. I just didn't want to have to come back to you in January and ask the same thing. So that's why I'm recommending no later than February, the meeting. That would just be my recommendation if the council is confirming that the intent wasn't strict 90 days.
Like to make a motion that we grant the 90 days. We grant the extension of time, and that it be brought back no later than the February 16th, 2023. This is the third one. I feel most comfortable with that.
I foresee it on January. It's just
the best interest of the applicant to see this as possible.
So I'm hearing this one to the one. Okay, second. Okay, any further discussion of comments? Okay, we'll come up.
Commissioner David Wood,
Yes.
Commissioner Kevin Henderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Stephen Long,
Yes.
Commissioner Luke Curran,
Yes.
Chairperson Roxanne Stevens.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's go for the second item on old business. Did we only have one item on old business, or is it on the agenda now?
so there are two. The amended agenda was not in your original packet because that was, but I did pass out an amended agenda physically for everyone as well. So
Okay, so, minor subdivision 2018-6, site non-development review 2018-23. At August 25th, 22, planning commission meeting, the commission drafted a 90-day minor subdivision 2018-6 and site non-development review 2018-23. Staff and the applicant by 13 LLC are requesting clarification pertaining to the motion made by the planning commission. Second it.
There's one that disclosed that I've had with, some exchange and phone conversations with Matt North, the last speaker regarding, whether the motion made on October 25th was ambiguous.
Yeah, sure. This is a kind of a similar item. So again, at the August 25th Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission heard an item regarding a 1-year extension request for minor subdivision 2018-6 and site architecture review 2018-23. I've identified in the slide the original approval and the first extension, which gave the project an expiration of September 26th of 2022, which is why there was an extension request on the agenda for an additional year. The staff analysis and recommendation on that extension request at that meeting was that the project as originally approved was not found to be in conformance with several current codes and regulations. And staff's recommendation at that meeting was approval of a 90-day extension to allow the applicant to resubmit revised plans, bringing the project into conformity with the current codes, and then return those revised plans to the commission within that 90-day timeframe to make a further decision on the extension request. That recommendation was not adopted by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission motion was to grant a minimum 90-day extension and reaffirm the original project, minor subdivision, and conditions of approval as approved by the City of Hollister Planning Commission on September 26, 2019, minor subdivision 2018-6 and site and architectural 2018-23, resolutions number 2019-45 and 2019-46, along with resolution 2021-24 for a 1-year extension, with the addition of a condition to update the stormwater management plan subject to the city engineer's approval. And then there was a clarification of an amendment to that motion to remove the word minimum. So you'll see that I have it stricken there. So this is the motion that was made. On October 10th, the city received a resubmittal of the applicant's revised plans, and the planning division routed that out to our development review committee after taking a business day to organize that routing out. On October 26th, there was an email from Adriana Ortiz to Gary indicating that we take about 2 business days for staff to route projects, and we give a DRC review of 2 weeks for plans, so that the DRC can give us comments or conditions. And on that day that the project was still under review, but that if there are comments, that staff has to file them into a letter to be sent out, and that, well, given the timeline of your project, or given the timeline above, your project is still under review with the DRC. Provided there are no additional revisions, your project may make it on the 11/17/22 PC meeting. And then on October 28th, which was 2 days after that, it was a Friday, we had to notice in the newspaper this meeting. And because I had received comments from the DRC and was working on that compiled letter, I did not include the project on this agenda for public notice. On November 1st, which was the Monday following that Friday, I sent an email to Matt Knorr, Gary Coates, and Patrick Orozco in response to 2 other emails I'd received from both Gary Coates and Matt Knorr. And I told them, and this is kind of essentially the whole email, but that Adriana had let them know that email that I just read to them, that we might not have had time to review the plans to make it on this public notice. And then that our recommendation at the August 25th was for an arbitrary 90 days because we thought that that was enough time, but that our resolution at that time, which was not adopted, had a condition that the applicants would turn plans around in a relatively short time frame so that staff could get that 90-day review done by the December Planning Commission meeting. And I had attached in that email our draft staff report that wasn't adopted, as well as the adopted minutes, which showed that resolution or the motion that I read earlier. I told them that the project had been routed to DRC and that I had received comments. I was working on compiling them. And because the notice had gone out Friday, I did not notice it. And that I told them that I believe that the planning commission's intent was to extend the project for 90 days to make the requested revisions and bring the project back for further consideration of the extension. And then I told them in that email as well that we intended to schedule an item under old business for today's meeting to confirm that intent and get consensus that they'd allow us to keep working if we needed more time beyond the 90 days. On November 10th, Matt Nora sent me an email responding to my 11-1 email, indicating that he was not aware of previous emails, indicating that it may or may not be scheduled for 11-17, depending on DRC review. He indicated to me that in that email, quote, the planning commission reaffirmed their original findings at the August 25th meeting and asked the plans to be amended to address staff's specific comments of 1, undergrounding the stormwater, 2, remove internal fencing between buildings that conflicted with fire department access/circulation, 3, clarify the ADA path of travel between buildings and to public right of way, and 4, providing parcel specific parking calculations. He confirmed that he agreed that the planning commission did not adopt staff's recommended draft resolution, and that, quote, rather, the planning commission unanimously approved Chairperson Henderson's motion for a 90-day extension of time and to reaffirm the original project's conditions of approval with the addition of the condition to update the stormwater management plan, underground stormwater. Based on the planning commission's approval, our project was to return to the commission 90 days certain from that August meeting, which should be this November's meeting. He believed the GRC review of the revised plans is not required. He believes staff's understanding of the intent of the motions to, quote, make wholesale changes to the project plans to comply with current codes and policies is again 100% incorrect. And then he, quote, told me staff's attempt to try to have the planning commission reaffirm staff's incorrect interpretation of their motion is unacceptable at the upcoming November planning commission meeting. Immediately following that email, still on November 10th, staff and the city attorney met to review the video. While the meeting minutes that are adopted are the official record, we do record our meetings. We reviewed the video and we confirmed that the adopted meeting minutes accurately reflect the motion. However, upon review, the motion doesn't indicate that the project should return to the commission, just that a condition to underground the stormwater was added and that the motion indicated a 90-day extension to the project. This could potentially mean that the project was set to expire on December 25th, 2022, which is 90 days after their expiration date identified in their resolution. Our city attorney indicated that the applicant could submit another request for an extension, provided that it was submitted 30 days prior to the expiration deadline. That's per our code. And given that there was another planning commission meeting before the expiration of the project, which is the December 15th meeting, and that the applicant team had indicated that placing an old business item to confirm the intent was unacceptable, staff and the city attorney removed the old business item from the agenda, which was being drafted. Adriana also called the applicant on this day to inform them of the interpretation of the motion, directed them to the YouTube account where the video footage is publicly available. And we recommended the applicant submit at a minimum an email of their intent to request an additional extension prior to that 30-day deadline, just in case that is needed. And then that evening, the planning commission agenda and packet is published without an old business item for the project. On Friday, November 11th, the following day, we were closed in observance of the Veterans Day holiday. We did receive an email from Matt Nor per the conversation I had with Adriana with an intention request for that 1-year extension beyond December 25th, just in case. And then on Monday, November 24th, we received an email request at 3:45 requesting that the issue be placed onto the old business agenda. And so we did amend the agenda and published it at 5:02 prior to the 72-hour deadline for this meeting, to include the request for clarification. And that is what's on the agenda tonight. We are requesting clarification of this motion. I'm happy to answer questions as best as I can.
Okay, any questions from or comments from? the commission?
I'll open comments and, after any public comment.
Um, I sort of remember this, I remember this project, although I do not remember the request for the extension, so I mean, it's, I don't remember, but I do think that it sounds like there's one back and forth and it's kind of confusing, but I don't have any like a quite specific recollection of that. So,
I do, we're,
I was in the I remember this project about Nixon. Okay, so why don't we just move forward and with public comment and then we will come back. So let's start public comment at 9:22.
My first speaker is Gary Coates.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. If I may have Mr. North make the first in the presentation, since he's been mostly involved now, clean up at the end. That's acceptable to the chair. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, fellow commissioners. Thank you. I know it's been a long night, so I will be brief. And first, I do apologize for having to extend multiple emails to you communicating. Normally, we try to work with staff and kind of not have to reach out and kind of engage the planning commission. But we were being continuing, and we continue to face a lack of communication, both timely and just being clear in what is going on with the project. At the last June 25th Planning Commission meeting, the project that came before you was for a one-year planning extension request. At that meeting, as you may recall, the commission unanimously reaffirmed the original conditions with the discussion then transferring over into the issue of showing underground stormwater. And at that meeting, our position was, hey, you already have a condition in your packet that says that the underground, the stormwater should be per the approval of the city engineer, which he can come back and say, hey, gotta be underground, gotta go underground. So we already thought that was in the mix, a legitimate and fair condition that we abide by. But nevertheless, we went with staff and the planning commission during that discussion. It was like, hey, guys, we'll give you 90 days to work together on the stormwater item. Get that plan cleaned up, submit it, read back, and you'll do that in 90 days. And the spirit intent was then we then give you a one-year extension. So what we did is immediately after the meeting, got onto, with our engineers, started working on that. Updated all the plans, spent over $15, almost $20,000 amending those plans to go through all the engineering, making sure the underground worked. Resubmitted those plans. At no time when we submitted, scheduled the meeting, followed up with, hey, how's our application going? Never once was there any indication from staff that there was some ambiguity or something that wasn't clear about the intent. It wasn't until literally, the day, as Eva mentioned in this outline here, that we got this notice like, hey, you may not be on here. And then we got a call Thursday before a holiday at literally 4:50 p.m. that from the planning director, hey, you may not be on here. And there's some other issues, write this letter for a request and so forth. And if I may ask for some additional time to further communicate this. So the reason why we didn't we're not able to respond to the letter until Friday was because we get a call at 4:50 PM that afternoon. I mean, I think it's unrealistic to think we can turn around a letter and respond to that in 10 minutes before it goes to business on holiday. But nevertheless, but we're here tonight saying, hey, we've been working in good faith. We've underground the stormwater per everyone's request. We address the accessibility on-site access. We address parking. We address bicycles. We address removing the interior fences to ensure that circulation, the fire department was achieved. So we've amended all the plans, again, in good faith to address all these comments. We don't understand why it's taking so long to review. As of today, we still have not received any comments on that. You know, the 30-day period for comments to be provided is exceeded. We still haven't received anything even now, and if it's indicating there's DRC comments. Why aren't those shared in a timely fashion? We're trying to move forward on a project, and these type of delays are impacting not only us, but the city and the economic development that these projects will bring to us. So with that, we respectfully request that, we prepared a draft motion in light of staff not wanting to provide one, or even a staff report tonight, that basically, says, hey, reaffirm the findings, grant us the 1 year, and we're going to go off and continue to work and do our due diligence to move this project forward. So I hate kind of airing this kind of laundry out like this. It's not the way we like to operate and proceed, but it's kind of, we're not really getting a lot of cooperation with on this project. It's really just thank you for your time. I definitely, if there's any other questions, I'm glad to help answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Gary Jones.
Madam Chairman, members of the commission, I'll try not to discuss any of the items that Matt has gone over. If I can, to just restate a couple things for clarity. At the evening, and when we get extended, I had requested a date specific to be continued to, but it was determined, which we understood staff needed additional time to review the water management plan. So the date certain may not have been able to have been determined. So we went with the 90 days, and that was fine with us. I think the important part, as was mentioned by Matt, is that in the existing conditions of approval, which were affirmed by the planning commission that evening, the issue really dealt with 4 items, which I won't go into again, other than one of them, namely storm drainage. And item condition number 53 within the subdivision ordinance or resolution specifically says undergrounding of the facility is an option that is up to the city engineer. So, and at that evening, if you remember, Mr. Patrick Orozco was here. Patrick agreed that he would indeed comply with the undergrounding of stormwater information. So in doing all of that, we felt we had adequately addressed everything. DRC comments were really not applicable because we've already agreed to do everything and are in the event submitted. That was kind of why we were pushing through. And so this evening, what we were hoping this evening is we're in a position, because all of those items have been addressed, they've been agreed to, there's conditions that cover every single one of those items, that the commission, in our opinion, is prepared to actually this evening take a motion to, again, continue that reaffirmation of the original conditions which were done, plus adding, if they wish, subject to the October 10 submitted plans, which incorporate the storm drainage process. So that we would feel could adequately cover the city for any issues that may come up. And again, the conditions of approval were well written on the first one. We just took the resolution that was approved originally, just put new dates on it to reflect this evening and the extension, not changing any conditions. They're all the same as they were, other than the updated conformance requirements. So that would be our request to the commission this evening, if you deem it appropriate. Our concern is, in order for us to get power, PG&E to approve to build a project, we have to have an entitlement project, one that has a longevity to build. Right now, we don't have that. We're held hostage not by you, but by the process of PG&E to get our approvals to be able to build. We can't do that. We couldn't prove that we have power. So that's a really important timing wise for us to get there. Why we're concluding. I've never done that before. Thank you.
Chairperson, Stevens, could I just comment? The item on tonight's agenda, which is what you're allowed to discuss, is what occurred on the 25th. So you wouldn't be permitted to discuss or decide to do something new or different. So just wanted to put that out there, or to reevaluate the project itself. It's more deciding what occurred on the 25th and giving some direction.
I do have another speaker online, Patrick Orozco. Patrick, I'm gonna go ahead and give you the authority to unmute.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Appreciate the opportunity to participate here. We in Q2 of this year were struggling to get on the agenda for Planning Commission on this very extension issue before your July recess. We communicated the importance of time and how the summer was a period of time for marketing purposes. We communicated the concerns that we had with PG&E. We communicated our concerns with eroding debt markets. The debt markets have now fallen into shambles. Obviously, you've been watching the Federal Reserve. They've raised the rate of borrowing by 2.25% since we've been talking about getting on your agenda. And for one reason or another, the tail is wagging the dog. We have a project we're prepared to commit resources to. Since we've been talking about an agendized meeting that never could get published, we have lost another $250,000 in additional engineering fees, consulting fees, legal fees, and holding costs just because of time. And we're extremely frustrated at this point, getting to the point where it's tough to sugarcoat the situation. We've never had this problem in any community. We're asking for a simple extension of a year, and failure to put us on an agenda. I appreciate Eva's thorough effort to characterize the situation, but it was, let me just say in a public forum, highly edited. And it's gotten to the point where we need to essentially raise our hand and say, we object, let's get along with this. Please stop charging us fees. Please stop charging the city fees to administer a simple one-year extension on a project that has already gone through a full EIR, which is not something that many other major projects that have now jumped ahead of us in line with PG&E have endured, and we need help. We are effectively failing at a staff level, and this is where we ask that the appointed members of city leadership clearly communicate the intention to see projects that have been thoroughly vetted an opportunity to move forward. Thanks so much.
Okay, any other cards and comments?
I have no more speakers.
Okay, so I'm gonna close this part at the public part at 9:35. Okay, so questions, comments from my fellow commissioners?
If you don't mind, I would since I chaired the meeting and made the motion, I would like to try to clarify what happened that night. So the agenda item was branches of a lane extension. And but the staff had concerns about different aspects of the project not being in line with conditions of approval, which had since, I guess, have changed since the original project was approved in 2019. So that was the intent of staff that evening was to that was the agenda item, was whether we could grant the wind extension. I would just like to quote something that Eva Kelly had said back in June. She said that we could I wrote adopt a 90-day extension of time for these two projects, and then essentially what the time will be used for is the applicant can make amendments to their plan to bring it more into consistency with the current code and general planning policies. And this is the important part, and then we'll return the item for consideration of the time extension. So the intent that was communicated to us by staff was that the intent was, hey, we need more time to work with the applicant on some details. And then when we're done, the item will come back for consideration of the one-year extension. So to hear that, you know, if there's question about what the intent was of the motion, I mean, staff communicated to us what their intent was. It was going to come back. So, and just to clarify, the motion that was made was, well, the stance that I took, and I believe Commissioner Dubois took, was that we believe that the original condition of approval that existed in 2019 should continue and not change. So that was part of the motion. And then we said 90 days because that was what staff communicated to us. We need time that it would take to work out the intents. And the only condition that we modified from the 2019 was the stormwater underground. And I believe that the applicant has been this during this 90 days, the applicant has done more than just the 90 days. I mean, I'm sorry, more than just the undergrounding of the stormwater. The applicant also worked on pedestrian, access between buildings and bicycles and things like that. So the applicant has done even more than what was than what we as a commission need from them. So that's my background.
Madam Chair, I was at the meeting and I do recall that when Commissioner at that time, Vice Chair Henderson made the motion, it was based on the original conditions of approval, based on the original application. And we had discussed, and I think I may have brought it up, that the plan review, that there would need to be accessibility around the buildings. And also, I recall that when we talked about undergrounding the stormwater, that it was agreed upon by, I believe, Patrick Orozco to go ahead and follow through on undergrounding the stormwater. So those are the items I do recall very clearly. Regarding the 90 days, I'm sure that probably that's what Commissioner Henderson explained, is that the 90 days were for the applicant to make those revisions, bring it back, review it, and then consider the one-year extension. I think that part I'm not as clear as, but I'm very clear on the other parts of that. That I'm concerned with. What happened that evening.
Okay, so here's what I think we are, so just based on whatever future commissioners and everything that sounds like there was some communication gaps or issues. And that's why we're here. So what I would like is clarification on what decision are we allowed to make? If we can't based on what the commissioners was that we would be here at this meeting and we would be voting on the one-year extension. I want to, as much as possible, honor that, but want clarification on what is it that we are able to vote on.
So first of all, it doesn't, what we're asking tonight doesn't even require a vote. It just requires consensus of 3 commissioners to affirm what they intended on August 25th. So it's basically, and correct me if this is the clarification you're looking for, but did the commission intend for the 90 days to be a period of time to start to work with the applicant to fix the stormwater issue, and then that application would return to the commission to decide whether or not there would be a one-year extension?
Yes, and I think potentially there's confusion about what the 90 days was because, and as I indicated in my original email, when we were gonna come with an old business item just to confirm, staff's recommended 90 days was 90 days from the project entitlement extension, which takes us to December, which is where we're at. A 90-day extension doesn't extend from the planning commission motion unless I guess explicitly stated it extends the project entitlement. And so staff had always, when we recommended the 90-day extension, it went through December. And we had recommended that, and it had timeframes in which we thought that staff could turn around the reviews that we need on revised plans. But yes, what we were requesting, and we had understood to come back as well. But then when I told the applicant that that was what we were coming to ask about, then they said they disagreed with our interpretation of the motion. So we rewatched the minutes, and this is the motion, which doesn't actually explicitly say to come back. So that's what we're asking for clarification on.
So what I heard from fellow commissioners is that their understanding was that the 90 days would be up at this meeting and not at the December meeting. And I think this is like, I think good for us to learn and to know, because we often will go on 90-day extensions and we don't attach dates to it. And honestly, as like in this seat of the commissioner, I would have expected the 90 days to be up 90 days from the day that we voted on that. If that is not in fact the case, and I think it'll be very important that we're really clear on the specific dates and what that 90 days means. And I'll just speak for myself, but just based on what I've heard from other commissioners, and I believe that possibly their understanding of the same is that when we are voting on an extension on an item, then we're thinking it's from the date that we're making the vote. So I think it'll be important moving forward that we talk in language that attaches dates, so that's what we're clear about that. So that's just one thing. And then I am hearing from the commissioners that the intent was that today we would be voting on that one-year extension. That it seems like that's what the intent was and spirit behind that motion. So if we don't need a vote, then I think that we should be voted with that, if we don't need a vote. We just want to clarification, but it seems like if that was the intent, then we should be voting on that.
Voting on,
The 1 year extension,
well, that's not on the agenda,
right?
yeah, unfortunately, so,
We take exception to that not being on the agenda. I'm sorry for out of speaking, but I mean, we specifically
Yeah.
requested the staff. to be on the
Mr.
agenda.
Mark, I mean, I
Yeah.
share your sentiment, I share your sentiment, but it's not really not appropriate. Even though it's just us in the room, I think it's just it's not appropriate. I share your sentiment, I think it's,
You've been said, right?
yeah, yeah, well, you've heard your concerns, but I don't care, we do. Okay, so we need to be able to correct this. And I don't think that there was any malintent in this, I don't think any of us believe that, I think though, that we do need to figure out a way to, first of all, set some expectations moving forward on how we're going to communicate with this applicant so that there isn't a sense of their beauty. Given the runaround, that there's a bunch of red tape. Also that we are able to move forward with what our expectation was to move forward with, which was the vote. So we need to be able to resolve that issue tonight. And we need to be really clear about how we're going to do that. So with that, we at commission, I mean, I'm gonna just say for politics, and then I'll ask my fellow commissioners. I think we need some ideas about how we're going to resolve this as we move forward on this meeting tonight.
you can give staff direction by consensus, so you can direct staff to do X, Y, Z, and as long as you agree, and that's what they will do. So for example, if you wanted them to agendize this for December, you could direct them to do that, or to agendize the 1 year extension request, or January, or I don't want to throw out dates because I don't know how these things take or what's required, but you can provide that explicit direction to staff to do that.
Yeah, so I think, so the issue of this old business agenda item, I believe, was for staff to get clarification on what the motion was on the August 25th. So, I've given my understanding of what our intent was, and Commissioner White has done the same. So I think what would make sense is to have staff tell us now what their understanding of what we've said tonight. And then if we agree that it's, not consensus stuff, and that would be nice again.
I mean, do you have any questions about what the intent was now that there has been clarification? Is there further question that you have about?
No, I think I understand that the intent was, as staff understood, that it was to come back. The application, a 90-day extension extends the application for 90 days, so there's no need for another extension. If that's the case, it will come back on December. Staff will continue their review and we'll bring you our recommendation based on the review of the revised plans, which was the intent that we understood the intent to be. I think it was really a question of November or December, and then upon review,
And then,
clarifying that comeback situation.
yeah, okay, I mean, I don't know that we have another choice but to do that. It's just gonna have to be noticed. To let it give you the simple. If the intent was that if we leave the item on tonight, so that we can vote on it, I mean, it's kind of a moot point that we're not able to do that. So we probably need to move forward to do that for December. And I think, what I would like to hear is how can we get past some of the communication issues so that in next month and 30 days, we'll have that clear, that we are able to make that vote and we don't cause more delays to the project. I mean, Yeah, I guess. I just
Yeah,
wanna
so
make sure that we-
we'll have in any draft resolutions, the dates at which the dates and times of the extension, that's standard
Sure.
condition language, and I can incorporate it into the staff report if that's what you're requesting.
When I'm saying specific, was let me make sure that, because I want to make sure that the communication with applicant is better in the next 30 days. That, I mean, I think that we want to make sure that there isn't a feeling that there is one thing where in human error, we all do that, we're all human, right? And then there is another thing that if there's a break on communication, we just want to make sure that that happens. And I'm talking specifically about the communication. So that in 30 days, we can come back and we have this meeting. We are ready to move forward. Everybody feels like they were able to do their part because there was this communication back and forth, and then we can vote on this. I need this.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And I don't know what that is. I mean, obviously, I think there was a lot of attempts, and but still there was some misfires. I don't know what that is about, but I just wanted to make sure that we're able to do that. Okay, so is there anything else that we need to talk about? Anything else that we need to talk about? So I think we all know. Any questions from the commission? Okay, okay.
May I ask one question? You mentioned just timing, not issues or whatever, and that's, if you're, I know the hearing is closed, I can't, I understand, that's fine, I would like.
So we will be back here in December with this item on the agenda. If we have questions about other timing issues, then talk to staff about that.
It deals with, I don't want to address it, it deals with your action before affirming the previous conditions. When you get here, we're not going to go through a full new set of conditions, we already had those conditions. So that was my concern, so I got it in there.
Okay. I mean, I should hear something from other commissioners about that. And I think staff heard too about.
I think that, as I recall, and as Commissioner Henderson concurs with, is that the old conditions were. It's clear, is that what the motion is based on the old conditions? And the undergrounding of the stormwater. The only thing that wasn't absolutely clear is this when you get to the night.
Well, I think the 90 days was clear, because I started by saying minimum 90 days, and I was correct, corrected to remove. So 90 days was clear.
The conditions was clear.
The conditions were clear. I think the only question was the intent that staff would bring this back. Or was our intent that 90 days of project was ends? And I said, based on what was said by staff that night, I think it was pretty clear that the staff's intent, they communicated with us, was that this would come back after the 90 days.
Right. So, regarding the 90 days, whether or not the staff would bring it back, or as you said, we would. And I think as I recall, and this is the only thing that I'm not crystal clear on, is the 90 days, what that time period entails, bringing it back. I would say that I would agree with Commissioner Henderson based on the way the discussion is going. And what we're sure about were the conditions and the 90 days, I would say I would agree with Commissioner Henderson on the 90 days. Okay.
Okay. All right, okay, thanks. We'll discuss some issue that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so, we're done with all business, let's move on to planning department report.
I have no reports. If I could ask that we go back to new business as well, it was skipped
Okay. Oh, business.
I have no new business. I just think we have to address it on the agenda. Thank you.
Sorry. I think it's like 3 hours plus. Always favorite for me. Okay. And so planning commission reports. Do they have anything? I do have one thing that's- Okay, so I let Eva know and the Plan Commission understand that I would not be submitting an application because my term is up with the new, my term is based on the mayor's terms. And so I have been thinking about this for a little while because of my changing my work situation that I talked a little bit about last time, more travel, more in-person work. So to get here, especially with the requirement that we're here in person. However, Eva did ask if I could stay on until a replacement was appointed by Mayor Casey or the new Mayor Casey. And I don't know yet, but I was gonna try to get here early, like I talked to Eva, and I was just, I got it right on time, so I didn't get a chance to do that. So I will be here for the December meeting, and then again, we'll have time to talk. I have a few questions about that, and then I can make that decision. I think December is a light month because of the holidays and stuff. So I think December will be okay. So I will be here for this. And then we'll just, although I am electing a new mayor, this is to because I really love this position, and I'm hoping that at some point I will, once the new person comes on board, I will be able to at some point in the future be back on this mission. But I just feel like I can't give 100% because my focus becomes this moment for me that I don't know how to take it to you. And listen to meeting 2 months ago, it's the I'm doing that, and I don't know that I'm not assured. So I just kind of, but I will be here for December, and then I'll talk to you about, about whether other possibilities related to staying on.
That's good.
I guess, I need to make an announcement also. I think a lot of people know. It's in a stage of transaction, it hasn't been finalized yet. But I did talk to the city clerk about it, because I know that, I might tenure as commissioner would end December 31st. However, with not knowing, I'll still be in the Hollister at least through March. So my intention is to go ahead and fill out an application until the day I move. I'll be hopefully continue on as a planning commissioner. But in the interim, I've got an RV, and you'll find me at Thousand Trails or Colorado Park. And RV, going to Airbnbs and so on. In fact, I talked to Adriana about this. And when I went into City Hall just the other day to talk to the city clerk, it was Daisy said, David, I understand you sold your house. That's all. So I guess she saw that. And that's the sale pending, but I wasn't going to make an announcement tonight because it hasn't been finalized, and I still want to stay on planning commission as long as I can, because we have a lot of work to do together, and as you all know, I've enjoyed it this past 18 years. So I want to continue on as long as I can. We'll see what happens. But I just want to, other thing, I want to appreciate Roxanne, you done a sterling job. And really, thank you for your time on the planning commission. And the great vision for No. I'll give you my official goodbye.
So we have a motion to end the meeting.
I would gladly.
Yeah, but it was for me, meeting that ended up with that. I will second it. All in favor of the roll call. All in favor.
Aye.
Really very.
Thank you.
I know.